Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 351 Modifying Memory. The underwater battle, or rather Thea's one-sided brutality, alarmed many sea creatures, but the powerful battle waves and swift swimming speed caused them to stay away. However, Kryptonians possess remarkable resilience. Thea's armor's passive ability amplified her underwater strength, rather than diminishing it. Hundreds of tons of force struck Thyra without causing fatal damage. However, the accumulation of these small effects, coupled with the depths of the ocean, weakened Thyra's resistance. Finally, after Thea delivered a punch to her abdomen, her consciousness gave way and she passed out. Huff, Thea exclaimed, exhausted. Fighting these Kryptonians with physical attacks was too much. This body, shaped by the ultimate advancement of genetic science, was far too formidable. It took nearly 10 minutes of beating her down to knock her unconscious. On land, how long would the fight have taken? Looking outward, she saw several small islands on the surface of the ocean. As expected, they had swarmed from the Gulf of Mexico to the Caribbean Sea. Thea swam out of the water with the unconscious Thyra, surveyed the surroundings, and found an uninhabited island to rest. Where could she train this Kryptonian? On Earth? Thea quickly dismissed the idea. Superman was happy to see his compatriots reform, but he certainly didn't like the thought of him brainwashing Thyra. Thea decided to go to another planet. Thea remotely contacted the gorilla Grodd, ostensibly accepting Sinestro's control. The gorilla was spreading the terror of the Yellow Lantern rings on a planet, controlling two groups of aliens in a fight. Grodd was incredibly happy. Through several wormholes, Thea pulled Thyra to this planet, far from Krypton and Earth. Instructing Grodd to find a quiet place, Thea began to use her magic to modify Thyra's memories. Compared to the steel bodies of Kryptonians, their willpower wasn't particularly strong. Thea effortlessly penetrated the depths of their minds, a forbidden zone untouchable by ordinary humans, the seat of their subconscious and conscious minds. With the exception of Superman, who was born naturally, all Kryptonians, including Supergirl, are genetically engineered, their destinies determined before birth. Some are warriors, others scholars, their genes optimize to the utmost in their favor. The fate of all Kryptonians is practically sealed from birth. Even if some want to resist, they can't pursue other professions because they simply can't learn them. Superman's parents gave him freedom, or rather, the right to choose. Superman is capable of any job. Zod's combat prowess is comparable, but he can't do anything else. His destiny is already sealed, he lives in battle and must die in it. Genes optimize certain traits, but the overall composition is delicate and fragile. Thea carefully searched and ultimately found what she needed. Thyra's loyalty to General Zod is unwavering and unshakable, but a closer look reveals that this loyalty isn't solely directed to General Zod. Thyra's genetic makeup is somewhat unique, optimized as a lieutenant. She possesses a certain amount of abilities, but none are particularly exceptional. Subconsciously, she must have a loyalist for her life to fulfill its full potential. God help me, Thea had to consider this, slowly shifting Thyra's image of Zod. Father, teacher, these were the labels she assigned to Zod in Thyra's mind. As for her loyalties, she replaced them with herself. Of course. This process couldn't be rushed. A conservative estimate is that it would take a month for Thyra's mind to shift. A dark magic energy was left in her brain, which would keep her in a coma for 7 days. Thea needed to first sort out Earth's affairs before continuing the brainwashing process. Instructing Gerudo to keep an eye on Thyra, Thea returned to Earth alone. It seemed like an eternity, but in reality, only 20 minutes had passed. General Zod, having first contact with sunlight, was carried away, but several of his men remained. Thyra, his lieutenant from the original time, and another towering Kryptonian engaged Superman in a fierce duel. But now Thyra had mysteriously disappeared. Not only Superman, but even the Kryptonians themselves didn't know where Thyra had gone. Even with their advanced communicators, they couldn't find her across half the universe in tens of millions of light years. To buy Zod time, the towering Kryptonian captain of the guards had to fight Superman alone. Unfortunately, the power disparity was too great, and Superman pinned him to the ground and beat him. Just as the Kryptonians were desperate, the Earth Army once again acted like a fool, enveloping both Superman and them. A barrage of missiles pelted the small Kansas town. The Kryptonians seized the opportunity to attack the Earth forces, then, while Superman was rescuing them, fled back to their spaceship. Clark didn't pursue them, unsure of what to do with his compatriots. With his reciprocal kindness and cheerful demeanor, he forged a bond with the captain and officially earned the moniker Superman. Thea observed this from outside the atmosphere, and Superman exchanged glances with her from a distance of dozens of kilometers. Superman nodded slightly, expressing gratitude for saving his mother. Earth was relatively unscathed, and Thea looked toward the Kryptonian ship. The Kryptonians were highly combat-savvy, having used special means to shield all of Earth's satellites. The Department of Defense was blind, unable to see anything in space, which in turn facilitated Thea's plans. She chose not to act rashly, but instead focused her attention, nearly laughing at the sight. The crew on board, unaware that General Zod's sudden exposure to the yellow sun was causing a qualitative change in his cells, thought he had contracted a virus. They shoved Zod into a seemingly advanced medical bay and busied themselves with disinfection and sterilization. Perfect timing. Thea was worried about when to retrieve the genetic map. Combining it with the central codex found in Superman's blood, the scientists on their ship had already reconstructed the Kryptonian genetic program. All they had to do was wait for Zod to return to normal so they could terraform Earth and rebuild Krypton. The time between reconstructing the map and the ship's explosion was short, and Thea had to admit she was incredibly lucky. The only powerful Kryptonians were General Zod and Phyra, the others weren't particularly impressive. She simply opened a portal outside the atmosphere, stepped through, and was already inside the ship. "Who's there?" The Kryptonian scientist bent over her adjustments, completely unaware of the outsider's presence. Without even looking up, she asked casually in Kryptonian. I'm just looking around," Thea replied, her ring's voice tuned to the Kryptonian channel. The Kryptonian scientist was initially oblivious, but soon realized something was amiss. Kryptonians have clear divisions of labor, and everyone works with a strong purpose. How could someone simply look around? That tone was too casual, wasn't it? Chapter 352 Obtaining Gene Modulation Maps. His brain sensed something was amiss, but he wasn't a warrior. Reflexively, he glanced back, only to see a fist gradually expanding before his eyes. Then, his vision went black, and nothing could be seen. Tisk, Thea shook her hand. This guy was ridiculously weak. The flaws of genetic manipulation were too obvious. Phyra could take 100 punches of this strength without batting an eye, but this big-nosed Kryptonian scientist could be knocked out with a single blow. The difference was immense. Then, Thea placed her hands on either side of the Kryptonian scientist's head and began to read his thoughts with her modified Martian Manhunter mind-reading technique. This scientist might be a sharp thinker and a skilled researcher, but his willpower was even weaker than Phyra's. All his memories were neatly arranged, waiting for anyone to access them. Thea bluntly explained the operation of the main control panel. The Kryptonians, constrained by the technological planet's rules prohibiting the development of artificial intelligence, had skirted the rules, creating a pseudo-AI that lacked logical thinking and could only follow orders. Thea accessed the power armor's communication port and, using her Kryptonian scientist privileges, disabled the ship's pseudo-humans and connected her own Gideon to the Kryptonian system. "Scan and copy all their data," Thea ordered. Upon receiving the order, Gideon quickly began transferring files, a large amount of data entering the power armor's memory. "Who are you?" Less than 2 minutes into the data transfer, some of the backup data still set off a low whine from the ship's alarm. The tall captain of the guards, beaten to pulp by Superman, heard the ship's alarm and rushed over, but was visibly bewildered by the sight of Thea, an outsider. Previously, Thea had only been seen in her Yellow Lantern attire by Zod and Phyra, but now both were unconscious. Several Kryptonians had seen her through surveillance cameras during the battle on Earth, but she was wearing the power armor then. In other words, her lantern ring attire presented a new image to them. "What are you doing?" Seeing she didn't respond, the tall captain pressed the issue. Within 30 seconds, the remaining crew members had arrived at the main control room. They'd lived on this ship for 30 years, bored to the point of practically giving names to the microbes aboard. Now, with Thea's presence, they were momentarily bewildered. Krypton was a world of strict hierarchy, and several Kryptonians automatically turned to the highest-ranking officer, the captain of the guard, awaiting his decision. The captain, however, was a fierce, head-on warrior. If Zod and Phyra were here, they would have gone to war that morning. But his mindset was still stuck in the realm of following orders and commands, and being asked to make a decision was completely bewildering. Thea was unaware of his hesitation, but she didn't mind stalling for time. A moment of silence fell, the only sound remaining as the ship's alarms wailed as the main control computer read data. "Capture him," the captain of the guard finally gave the order. It was an order, but there were only 10 people aboard, including the commanding officers and the soldiers. Zod and the large-nosed scientist were stunned. Phyra was countless light years away, and there was a weak experimenter, a ship repairman, and a medical officer still tending to Zod. The Kryptonian guard captain and 3 of his men charged aggressively. Since Thea was too close to the control panel, they didn't dare use laser weapons. Instead, they relied on their skilled combat skills to subdue Thea and question her identity. Thea, waiting for the data transmission to complete, found a fistfight perfectly suited to her needs. She unleashed her chosen talent, Eternal Night, and the group, all male except for the distant Phyra, collectively outnumbered them by 30%. She then materialized a scaled-down version of Ares, spear in hand, and engaged them in battle. In outer space, Diana's feelings were unnecessary. The Ares, Thea's manifestation, bore the same physical features as Diana herself, complete with horned helmet, half-plate armor, leather apron, and Roman sandals. He exuded a fighting spirit that defied all odds. "First one," a deep voice rasped from the manifestation. Several Kryptonians were a bit careless, and their strength was suppressed by 30% by Thea's talent. The manifestation of Ares quickly found an opening. With a sudden burst of force, he ignored their armor and pierced one of them with his spear. Then, with a roar, he flung the unfortunate man far away. The force of the fling was so great that the Kryptonian collided violently with the ship's hull. With a muffled bang, a visible dent appeared on the hull, several wiring was visibly damaged, and alarms wailed like crazy. Thea didn't even look at her results. For an ordinary person, this would have been death. While the Kryptonian wasn't sure whether he would survive, it was unlikely he would recover his fighting strength for a while. With a deafening roar, the manifestation of Ares dodged the captain's axe, and simultaneously swung his spear sideways to block the long swords of 2 Kryptonian warriors. The 3 of them coordinated well. When the captain of the guards led the attack, the other 2 strategically defended, and vice versa. Their fighting techniques weren't as elaborate as those of Earth, but they were simple. Thea repeatedly employed several techniques, but failed to break their defenses. Trading wounds for wounds, she pierced the guard's arm, but her manifestation was also struck by the captain's axe. These guys are truly skilled. Recharged with yellow energy, the manifestation of Ares, with its new look, left the 3 of them a bit stunned. Can this thing kill? The question instantly crossed the minds of the Kryptonian warriors. Just as they were about to resume their attack, Thea swung her manifestation chain, catching a Kryptonian warrior in midair. As he landed, she kicked him in the stomach, sending him careening towards the other 2 enemies. The 2 quickly sheathed their weapons and scrambled to retrieve their companions. After fighting for so long, Zia realized that the relationship between these Kryptonians was very good. She just wanted to delay time and copy data, and did not seek to kill enemies. Zia always valued knowledge. This spaceship was transformed through Kryptonian prison. She fought hard for 30 years. I don't know how many advanced people in the universe than this spaceship. Diana's lasso appeared again, and she trapped the 2 non-combatants watching the fun next to her, shook her wrists and smashed them towards the commander of the guard. They are not combatants, the chief guard roared and went to pick up people again. Zia doesn't care whether he fights or not. She looks like she's coming back to life and tied up the Kryptonian warrior who was seriously injured before. Like a big villain, he grabbed the seriously injured person's neck and said, "Don't come over. I'll kill him when I come over." The chief guard obviously had never watched a similar TV series. She was so angry that she trembled with her mouth. Back and forth, she said, "You don't have the glory of a warrior, you have the ability to come for me." Chapter 353 Spaceship Crash. When the data copying process reached 100%, Thea abandoned the hostages. While they were scrambling to rescue them, she shouted and hurled her golden spear at the ship's weak spot. With lightning speed, Thea flung it forward, piercing the ship to the roars of horror from the Kryptonians. Whoosh! The shattered hull was followed by an unparalleled suction force, demonstrating the Kryptonians' formidable physical prowess. Capable of spaceflight, they showed no signs of panic, unlike the humans. Several people grasped for support or held onto their companions, and no one was blown away. "Take care, everyone." Thea felt a little regretful for not having seen the panicked expressions. Although they likely didn't want to see her again, she still waved a greeting, materialized her aircraft, and emerged from the breach. Instead of returning to Earth, Thea watched from afar. She saw flames constantly flashing from the Kryptonian ship. Although there was no oxygen in space, they carried a considerable amount of supplies. Explosions were frequent, and despite their efforts, the ship's trajectory inevitably tilted, seemingly heading for Earth. Call it a day. Thea got everything she needed. Kryptonians looked like humans, but they were a different species underneath. While they wouldn't be of much use to her divinely altered body, borrowing their genetic engineering could help strengthen her parents and two brothers. She flew directly to a nearby planet, retracted her manifestation, and opened a portal back to Earth. She didn't want to worry about the large, wobbly target in the sky. Whether Superman flew up to confront her or the Earthlings unleashed some advanced technology to shatter him, it was none of Thea's business. Feigning injury, she slowly flew back to the Ministry of Defense. "Sorry, that alien was too powerful. I couldn't catch her." "She let her get away," Thea said, giving the illusion that Phyra had already returned to the ship. Admiral Swanwick repeatedly assured her it was nothing, showing genuine concern for her, asking if she was injured. Compared to the immensely powerful alien Superman, an Earthling like Thea, someone who knew her inside and out, was far more valuable. While foreigners might not have heard the saying, "Those who have stable property have perseverance," the principle applies. Labels like "one of us," "trustworthy," and so on were readily attached to Thea. Several experts in the Department of Defense analyzed Thea's materialization ability as a figment of their imagination. The subsequent battle with Zod was nothing more than a power armor. Those in power weren't afraid of technological weapons, but rather Superman, a figure in a tight-fitting suit who could be flung thousands of miles with a single blow. When General Zod, in the original time and space, obtained the genetic modulation map for Krypton, he immediately split his spaceship in two, heading to the northern and southern ends of Earth, attempting to modify the Earth's climate and transform it into new Krypton. However, they were too busy repairing their spaceship to attend to Earth's affairs. The scene was a bit eerie for a moment. With all the satellites blocked, they had no idea what was happening in the sky. Their intuition suggested the aliens hadn't left. The situation was that the aliens wouldn't come down, and the Earthlings couldn't get up either. Admiral Swanwick was at a loss as to what to do. A staffer suggested that Thea lead a team to destroy the aliens, but he flatly refused. What a joke, Superman was in the room. If he launched an attack, who could stop him? The minister thought 3 or 5 Theas wouldn't be enough to defeat Superman, but they could certainly hold him off. Thankfully, Superman and Lois Lane shared a heartfelt kiss, and the guilt he felt for his compatriots dissipated considerably. He'd been so focused on Lois that he hadn't seen Thea destroy the spaceship. Now that the Kryptonians had repaired the spaceship, he hadn't noticed anything was wrong. "I'm going to finish this." Clark gazed affectionately at Lois, then nodded to the generals and soared into space. His smile was charming in Lois's eyes, but it was utterly arrogant in Admiral Swanwick's eyes, and even a hint of provocation upon closer inspection. Several people anxiously awaited the news. A few moments later, a guard quickly arrived, saying, "General, satellite signal restored." Everyone, including Thea, breathed a sigh of relief. There were also Quinn satellites in the sky, though not as numerous as Luthor and Batman's. There were still over a dozen. If all of them were destroyed, the loss would be enormous. 7 or 8 military satellites immediately transmitted their signals to the minister's office. Thea, along with Amanda and Martian Manhunter, who had been watching from the room for a while, also watched the live broadcast. Zod's ship was erupting violently, with people being ejected from it. The ship, which had only been temporarily repaired, was now riddled with holes. Even more terrifying, the ship's power system had lost control, and the Earth's gravity was pulling it rapidly towards the surface. The Black Minister quickly picked up the phone to contact the Defense Department scientists outside. "Where's the impact point?" "Calculate it." After a flurry of chatter, the other end finally gave the minister an answer. "It's in Metropolis." The minister hung up the phone, stunned. Everyone in the room was also stunned. Martian Manhunter hesitated for a moment, but finally stopped when Thea jumped out. "I'll be there right away. My staff are all there." Without a word, She dashed out of the office. Too late. "We're falling too fast," the Black Minister tried to call her back, but before she could finish her words, Thea was gone. Thea had been traveling at half speed, both to show she was still injured and to indicate she had orchestrated this whole thing. While copying the data, she had secretly instructed Gideon to hack the other party's control system. Whether Superman came to sabotage or Earth launched a nuclear weapon, the wreckage would crash into the tallest building in Metropolis, Lex Luthor's L building. Gideon calculated 2,239 possible ways the ship could be damaged and arranged 551 alternatives. Unless the ship is reduced to dust, its only target will be the L building. The Quinn group is entering Metropolis, but unlike the Luthor group, they have no foundation at all. What should they do? Thea's idea is to build reputation. She won't expose her abilities to the public to prevent the ship's crash. Instead, she plans to use her original identity to provide disaster relief. As the group's reputation rises, her position will naturally rise. No place to live? The Quinn group will build you a house. If you're injured, lie down in the medical cabin. It'll be done in 10 minutes, free of charge. If you're short of food or water, the former Merlyn shipping department will ship you plenty of food and drinking water, all free of charge. When the Quinn group's new headquarters is established in Metropolis in a few days, won't the citizens come to welcome the Emperor with food and drink? Chapter 354 Rescue Citizens. Zod's ship crashed at a breakneck speed. Shortly after leaving Washington, Thea saw the Kryptonian spacecraft slam diagonally into Lex Luthor's building. She even used the Eye of Horus to observe Luthor's expression. A normal person would have been stunned, but Luthor, one of DC's 3 most popular villains, reacted with remarkable speed. Sensing something was amiss, he abandoned his secretary, who was reporting to him, and soared into the air. His shoulder shattered the floor-to-ceiling glass, and mid-air, he flipped a switch on his watch, and a pair of green hang gliders bulged from the back of his belt. Luthor glanced at the ship's trajectory and glided in the opposite direction. HMPH, lucky him, Thea was now Luthor's rival, and many knew of her. Her status as a superpower restricted her from using unconventional tactics against him. While Luthor was unaware of her abilities, he possessed a wealth of advanced technology, and he was also bound by the rules, unable to use such lethal methods against Thea. Their respective abilities limited them to a narrow range of conflict. Unless one side's power reached the point of overwhelming the world and disregarding all rules, the conflict would likely drag on for a long time. Today's spaceship crash was an unconventional move, seen by outsiders as an unavoidable force. It was a shame that Luthor was so decisive, abandoning his charming secretary and bodyguard and leaping directly from a building 100 stories high. He didn't have superpowers. If his glider malfunctioned, he'd be 100% certain to die, a horrific death. But his decisiveness was unparalleled. He made a decision to save his own life without hesitation, abandoning his subordinates and employees. Unlike the old lady in Kansas who loved to watch the action, Luthor's glider flew directly to the roof of a building, climbed onto a parked helicopter, and chose to leave the city directly. Thea flew slowly forward, and when she arrived at Metropolis, the once thriving city looked like a living hell. General Zod's spaceship slammed into the Luthor building at a 45-degree angle, severing the Metropolis landmark in half. The ship, still surviving, tumbled across the ground for thousands of meters, destroying countless homes and buildings before exploding in two with a deafening roar. The Kryptonians aboard were all killed, with only the indestructible Superman and Zod, who had become resistant to the effects of the sun's rays absorbing yellow light, surviving. Thea watched Superman unleashing his mighty power on General Zod, feeling a pang of disbelief. That same day, Superman's adoptive father, Jonathan Kent, had chosen to die rather than allow Superman to use his powers to save him from a dog. If he had witnessed this scene, he would surely have felt his death was unjust and undeserved. It's hard to fathom the Kansas farmer's motives. He might have wanted Superman to live out his life as immortal, but fate was not something he could control. Superman, against his will, stepped before the eyes of the world, taking that crucial step before the eyes of the entire world. The Metropolitan Library, the Food Center, the Arts Center, and countless other buildings were reduced to rubble in the clash between the two. Finally, as the two engaged in a fierce struggle, Zod threatened Superman with the lives of humanity, forcing him to make a choice. Desperate, Superman followed his heart, became a human, and killed General Zod. Seeing the battle over, Thea knew it was time for her to join the fight. She found an empty room, changed into her clothes, and pulled out her phone to begin arranging disaster relief tasks. The CEOs of the group, though perplexed by the idea of going to Metropolis for relief efforts, didn't object. They were all employees, and the relief efforts weren't their own money. Contributing and directing the effort would earn them a good reputation. Why not? Everyone. A large group of people boarded the group's Airbus and headed for Metropolis. What? Miss Thea, you went to Metropolis? After receiving Thea's call, the black brother Diggle was completely stunned. He was still looking for people in Star City, but the employer had gone to other cities. He didn't know what to say. Although he was a little dissatisfied, Thea asked him to lead a team to rescue people. For John Diggle, who was full of justice, this was a task full of honor. He had no reason to refuse. Thea ordered Diggle to pull out the hundreds of bodyguards he had recruited. These people were young and strong, and they were the main force for disaster relief. After that, he contacted Bruce Wayne and Lucius Fox in Gotham, hoping that Wayne Group would also contribute. The original Batman inexplicably ran to Metropolis to rescue the wounded because his Wayne building was also in Metropolis. However, in this time and space, things took a turn thanks to Thea's involvement. The merger of Quinn and Merlyn and the announcement of their new headquarters in Metropolis caused the Wayne Enterprise to abandon its strategic plan to enter Metropolis. They opted to wait and see, even considering the possibility of profiting from the conflict. Meanwhile, Batman was at home watching TV with Alfred. Upon receiving Thea's call, Batman, though somewhat displeased with Superman's brazen fighting, knew nothing had happened to his men, so he naturally wouldn't harbor such resentment towards Superman. He expressed support for Thea's intention to provide disaster relief. As for his personal assistance, he didn't have the time. The Joker had escaped again, and Jason Todd, now the second-generation Robin, was diligently tracking down leads. After watching the live broadcast from Metropolis, he still had to go and arrest the perpetrators. Lucius Fox, whose relationship with Thea had cooled somewhat due to the Quinn Enterprise's recent efforts to steal Wayne Enterprise's business, also expressed his willingness to send someone. Thea went directly to the Quinn Corporation's base in Metropolis. Luthor was to the north, and Quinn to the south. The spacecraft landed in the Luthor building to the north, so naturally, the battle took place there. The south suffered some damage, but the damage wasn't significant. She approached the on-site officer and explained her purpose. He readily agreed. After all, Thea was paying for the rescue, and many of their employees were locals to Metropolis, so contributing to the relief effort was a no-brainer. Many people, armed with various tools, followed Thea and began rescuing people. Little boy, be good. Follow this uncle and rest over there. We'll rescue your mother, Mom, don't worry. Your husband's wound has stopped bleeding. Our medical pod will arrive shortly. This kind of injury can be treated quickly. Is your boyfriend still down there? Okay, go rest over there. We'll rescue him. Thea searched the rubble for survivors. Without using the Eye of Horus. Relying solely on Quinn Corporation thermal imaging equipment, she rescued numerous trapped citizens. She's been on numerous TV interviews and is a celebrity, big and small. Even if someone doesn't know her, they'll know her identity once she introduces her. What a good person. Such a conscientious capitalist is rare. People tend to follow the crowd, and more people are gathering around her. Chapter 355 Luthor doesn't need mercy. With everyone working together, the rescue effort sped up significantly. Meanwhile, the bodyguards led by Black Boss Diggle arrived, eager to impress their new boss and rushing to join the rescue effort. The team gradually began to move from the South City toward the north. Many enthusiastic citizens, less injured, automatically joined Thea's team. After all, Thea's team was well managed and outnumbered, making it practically the only rescue force in the city. Please, God, someone help, a faint cry reached Thea's ears. Some of you, follow me over there. Without further ado, Thea led Diggle westward. Two middle-aged men were desperately prying against a stone slab. A woman struggled in the cracks. Editor Perry, Thea realized he was a familiar face. He was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet. Although Lois Lane had conducted several interviews, Thea knew the editor-in-chief. Who are you? Oh, Miss Thea, come help. The old man didn't recognize Thea at first. Her obsessive-compulsive nature, driven by her desire to improve her reputation, had left her covered in dust and dirt, making her unrecognizable without a closer look. Over a dozen strong men swarmed over and rescued the trapped female reporter. Is everyone okay? The female reporter had barely managed to catch her breath when she saw Lois Lane running towards her from a distance. Lois had no idea whether Thea had been involved, covertly or not, but she recognized her instantly. They exchanged greetings, each wondering, "Why is this guy here?" Thea's question was simple: why did she keep seeing this guy in dangerous places? Could her memory be wrong? Was Lois Lane not just an ordinary person? Did she have the ability to teleport to wherever danger arose? She had clearly remembered her in Washington. Looking behind Lois Lane, she saw, as expected, a large number of U.S. troops had already entered the city, with Admiral Swanwick commanding the relief efforts with a righteous look on his face. "Fuck. How dare you compete with me for reputation?" Thea was furious, sending everyone from the Daily Planet to the rear to rest while she led the larger force to reap the admiration of the citizens. Superman had been planning to call it a day and head home after the fight, but when he saw Thea doing the rescue work, he thought better of it and joined in. 3 groups of rescuers formed in Metropolis. Superman was working alone, his strength and speed far outstripping the ordinary. Moreover, the ruins were the result of his battle with Zod, and now that Zod was dead, the citizens' resentment naturally vented on him. While he certainly helped many, he couldn't expect the citizens to weep in gratitude and bow down to him. The other 2 groups of rescuers were Thea and the military. Both were accompanied by numerous servants. Thea appeared more approachable, actively assisting the injured, treating everyone equally, regardless of wealth or status. General Swanwick's image was less impressive, given that he was already in his 50s. Shia's act of helping an old lady was a sign of compassion. He couldn't bring himself to do it, lest he be accused of being a hooligan. Yet, the military's reputation still attracted many citizens to join his rescue team. Those unfamiliar with Shia's actions would simply interpret them as compassionate, but General Swanwick knew the truth. Whether or not there was compassion was uncertain. Shia, along with 4 or 5 young men, feigned exertion to rescue the civilians trapped beneath the concrete pillars. It was a sheer show. He had no problem with the showmanship, though. How many people around him didn't? From some perspectives, he even felt a sense of relief. This was a display from one of his own. Politicians aren't afraid of showmanship, because they do it too. One more isn't much, and one less isn't much either. They fear those whose moral integrity is impeccable. For example, the figure in the blue leotard and bright red cape in the distance, this supposedly superhuman, perfectly embodied the concept of staying grounded. He remained suspended in the air, rescuing people without even touching the ground. This left General Swanwick feeling a bit lost. Could such a person truly obey the nation's orders and respect the Constitution? "General, the young heir of the Quinn group would like our transport aircraft to deliver her medical cabin," one of the black minister's subordinates reported. In full view of the crowd, Thea made no attempt to reveal her identity, and the black minister immediately understood her intent and nodded in agreement. Exchanges of benefits are also a way to build relationships. It's not one-sided. Mutual assistance and give and take are essential for a stable relationship. Without words or even glances, the 2 men worked together with tacit understanding. With the Secretary of Defense's order, a military C-17 transport aircraft was quickly mobilized, and within half an hour, the Quinn Group-produced medical cabin was delivered to Metropolis. 70% of the injured civilians suffered external injuries, and a series of debridement and suture procedures could be completed in just 10 minutes. The medical staff on the scene were still unhappy that this technological equipment was destroying their jobs, but they were secretly relieved by the significant reduction in workload. Superman could destroy everything, but he had no medical skills. Seeing Thea's swift treatment and the countless critically injured patients transported to the hospital, the citizens, thanks to his persistent care, finally warmed to him, fading their initial coldness. But medicine can't cure fatalities, and even the most powerful medical pods can't save the dead. As the rescue team reached the ruins of the former Luthor building, a large number of the dead were transported out. The impact was swift and violent, and many, lacking Luthor's decisiveness, were buried beneath hundreds of tons of rubble. Superman had no idea that his abilities were deeply feared by the military. Combining his X-ray vision with his super strength, he was able to rescue a few seriously injured people, even though most of those buried were already dead. "Chairman, we've found Mr. Luthor's secretary. She's seriously injured," an executive whispered to Thea. Thea had already spotted the secretary sent out by Superman, Mercy Graves. This woman was not only Luthor's secretary but also his bodyguard. She was incredibly skilled, even capable of fighting Deathstroke. She was incredibly loyal to Luther. The only unfortunate thing was her name, Mercy? Mercy? She had been ruthlessly abandoned by Luther, both in her past and present time. The secretary sent out by Superman was severely injured, her once delicate and cold features distorted. While her reflexes were impressive, she lacked the technological equipment and the impact was too swift. She managed to avoid fatal injuries thanks to her exceptional agility, but the hundreds-meter fall still left her near death. Both legs were severely fractured, and her organs were severely damaged. With current medical conditions, restoring her to her original state would require a miracle. Do everything you can to treat her, Thea said, glancing coldly at the executive who was about to offer advice, stopping him from saying anything. Late in the evening, a construction team from the Quinn Group arrived, erecting makeshift shelters for the homeless. Chapter 356 Do you know who I am? After a quick stroll outside, Luther, who had discovered Metropolis was safe, and the president, who had been hiding in the basement, dispatched special envoys. The two groups arrived in Metropolis one after the other. Before the special envoy could deliver his impassioned speech, he was stopped by Luther, who had arrived earlier. What did you say? You want the government to compensate you for your building and your employees' compensation? Mr. Luther, are you sure you're not overly frightened and overwhelmed? The special envoy, a middle-aged man with a hooked nose, refused Luther's request without hesitation. If you won't pay, the military should. In short, your incompetence has caused me significant losses, and you must give me an explanation. Lex Luthor, with flowing hair, ignored the glares from the special envoy and Swanwick, his expression serious and earnest. Unlike Bruce, who was severely constrained, and Thea, who had just taken over the group, Luthor held the highest prestige within the group. He had hidden technological weapons and secret bases around the world, constantly on guard against unexpected events. He didn't care how much a building plus the compensation for the employees would cost, he simply wanted to seize the opportunity to extract some benefits, such as alien spacecraft wreckage or Zod's body. But he had seriously underestimated the military's fear of Superman. Dream on. You want compensation from the military. The military is even providing protection. Most of the civilians being treated on the scene are soldiers, Minister Swanwick flatly rebuffed him. No chance. These things belonged to the military, no one else could get their hands on them. Luthor possessed considerable hidden power, but he couldn't openly confront the U.S. military. A wise look flickered in his eyes, and he ultimately chose to wait and see. Ms. Quinn, thank you for saving my employees. Luthor was admittedly arrogant, but not rude, on the contrary, he was polite. Seeing Thea diligently treating the wounded, he immediately rushed over and thanked her in person. Mr. Luthor, you're too polite. This is what I'm supposed to do. Your secretary, Miss Mercy Graves, is seriously injured. If you have any advice, please treat her immediately. Thea was eager to see how Luthor would respond. A strange glint flickered in Luthor's eyes, and Thea wasn't about to miss this opportunity. A hint of sarcasm laced her tone. Miss Mercy's name isn't very good, Mercy? Pity, haha. Mr. Luthor only believes in himself. He doesn't need pity. Lex Luthor maintained his composure, pretending not to hear, and nodded slightly. I'm going to check on my employees, humph. Thea snorted softly. She didn't expect this little incident to bring Luthor down. It wasn't about right or wrong, she simply found his inherent arrogance annoying. The treatment lasted for 3 days. Whether it was the president or the congressman, they paraded around Metropolis like a revolving door, but they didn't help much except to make their presence felt. Because the nature of the incident had yet to be determined, was it a natural disaster or a man-made one? The perpetrators were nowhere to be found. Superman had fled that same night. The man who had appeared in Metropolis was a young man from Kansas with corny eyes, named Clark Kent. With the Daily Planet's injuries and deaths, and plenty of vacancies, he had naturally landed an internship reporter position. These Americans have terrible face blindness. It needs to be cured. He couldn't recognize Superman in ordinary clothes and glasses. Thea couldn't help but wonder, catching sight of Superman disguised as a reporter. She was sitting in the audience, where a Kentucky congresswoman, Joan Finch, was delivering an impassioned speech. Thea pretended to listen intently, occasionally clapping to show her approval. Ms. Finch, you spoke so well, Thea said after the meeting. Thea, you're getting prettier and more beautiful, and you have such a sweet mouth. Joan Finch was Moira's political ally. Whether Moira ran for Congress or for governor, she would need a strong base of supporters. Thea simply expressed her support and didn't say much. She had far more on her plate than these politicians. As expected, the Metropolis reconstruction project fell squarely on the shoulders of Quinn Corporation. Preliminary estimates suggest $1 billion profit for the group, and Luther was naturally envious. However, as a high-tech corporation, research was no problem, but building buildings would be a sideline. Furthermore, over the past 2 years, the reconstructions of Coastal City and Midway City had honed Quinn Corporation's urban construction team. Their vast pool of skilled workers was a formidable asset, making the envy of other corporations futile. Having boosted their reputation, construction officially began on Quinn Corporation's new headquarters in Metropolis. Unlucky Luther had given up on demanding compensation. His company's original site, forcibly requisitioned by the military due to the crash site of an alien spacecraft, was powerless, and he had no choice but to recruit his own men and rebuild the L building on the site he chose. Suddenly, the bustling Metropolis could be renamed a construction site, as excavators now outnumbered cars. That evening, Thea, evading all scrutiny, donned her yellow light attire and retreated to a secluded corner of the city. Deathstroke, what do you want from me? The burly figure emerged from the shadows. His already massive frame, now transformed by the energy of the lantern ring, had become even more robust, like a brown bear. Boss, someone's offering a high-paying mission in the underworld. Deathstroke hesitated, but spoke nonetheless. I won't interfere with your mission, I remember telling you. Deathstroke composed his words, then spoke cautiously. According to my usual principles, I would accept it, but I personally object. Huh? Deathstroke, who valued money as his life, still had a mission he didn't want to take. Thea's curiosity was piqued. What mission? Threat a wealthy man who's been very popular lately. Popular. Thea had a connection, and considering Deathstroke's words about personally objecting, she seemed to have a clue. What's the name of that wealthy man? Deathstroke gritted his teeth, but the power of suggestion forced him to obey. The new chairman of the Quinn Merlyn Group, Thea Quinn, as if afraid Thea would make the final decision on the assignment, he quickly added, I'm close friends with her brother. I don't really want to do this, damn it. This was Thea's only way to vent her frustration. She wasn't sure if Luther was responsible, but it was definitely one of those people who were jealous of her own success. And for Deathstroke to have heard this news so unexpectedly, it was ridiculous. She pondered Deathstroke's description of threat. It seemed the other party had their reservations, not issuing any bounties. Luther's chances had increased by 20%. Knowing she had to reveal her true identity, Thea whispered to Deathstroke, do you know who I am? Huh? Deathstroke was confused. Why did the topic change so suddenly? What a sudden leap. After a moment's reflection, he shook his head, indicating he didn't know. Thea took off her mask and looked at him speechlessly. I am Thea Quinn. Chapter 357, Secret War. Huh? Deathstroke felt like a crow flew overhead. He was stunned for a long moment before realizing his hearing system wasn't malfunctioning. He glanced at Thea's face again. Sure enough, it was exactly the same as the one featured in various news media. As Thea's heroic act of rescuing the citizens of Metropolis was revealed, the number of people who knew her was increasing at an alarming rate. Her photo appeared in numerous newspapers, magazines, and online media. Are you Oliver's sister? Deathstroke asked, still a little uncertain. Thea nodded. Yes. Deathstroke remained silent, his head lowered in thought. What had Oliver said about his sister? Kind, cute, well-behaved, innocent and simple? He couldn't help but tilt his head to glance at Thea. This witch before him didn't fit any of those descriptions, did she? He remembered Oliver's solemn vow to protect his family and his sister, but would he really need you to protect him? The next second, the earth exploded. Could she have survived? The worldly wise Deathstroke couldn't help but ponder further. Oliver surely had no idea of his sister's abilities. Compared to Thea's hidden depths, Oliver was as innocent as a little white rabbit, stranded on a deserted island, while Thea inherited the family business. Was there some hidden secret? Thea, unaware of his wild speculations, revealed her true colors. She half-truthed, I went to Purgatory Island to look for you guys, but unfortunately, something delayed me. By the time I returned, you had already left. Huh? It was a lot of information to take in so quickly, and Deathstroke's shrewd mind took a few turns before it finally clicked. That person in red on Purgatory Island that day was you. It was you who took Shadow away. In his fury, his suggestion technique barely contained his outburst. Deathstroke was halfway through drawing his sword, but his mind, still affected by the magic, calmed down automatically. What? Still thinking about Shadow? Your daughter's almost her age, right? Thea sneered. HMPH, Deathstroke snorted. After calming down and thinking about it over the years, he realized that Shadow had only been a beautiful object in his mind back then, driven by a purely male possessive mentality, a far cry from love. If Thea hadn't mentioned it today, he would have almost forgotten her. The two quickly put the past behind them and focused on the present. Deathstroke, despite his burly build, was actually extremely intelligent. Several thoughts flashed through his mind, and combined with Thea's proactive exposure of her identity, he immediately connected many things. Are you competing with Luther? Do you suspect he's hired assassins from the underworld? Having seen enough of the methods used by these wealthy individuals, Deathstroke easily guessed the answer. Luther is more likely, but it could be someone else, Thea said calmly. She didn't care about the threat. Earth's weapons were almost ineffective against her. Her only vulnerability was her family. If she unleashed her full force, Luther, no matter how intelligent he was, would be no match for her. I know Lex Luthor. He's too smart. Even if you have superpowers, you can't underestimate him. Don't worry, I can roughly guess Luthor's mentality. His intelligence and talent made him what he is, but it will also destroy him. He's too arrogant and thinks he can control everyone's fate. Humph, it's only because I stole his limelight. In a few days, he will find his nemesis. Thea's words were a bit vague, and Deathstroke didn't fully understand, but he was not the kind of person who would ask questions. What do you need me to do? Infiltrate him and pass on the message. You don't need to do it deliberately, just let it go. Luthor doesn't trust anyone, so there's no need to waste your time. Your mission is to continue to take root in the underground world and understand all the dark corners of this world. After Thea finished speaking, she thought for a while and said, you can take on the task of kidnapping me. Just pretend to fight. You can also issue a task to Luthor through other channels. It doesn't matter whether you live or die, these rich people have nothing to do, just to put on a show for others to see. As a mercenary, Deathstroke was a little dissatisfied with this, but he still agreed. 3 days after their conversation, Thea was attacked. A few days later, she faced 2 more attacks. Deathstroke personally intervened in the 3rd attack, but was repelled by Dougal, wielding a simple freeze gun. While Thea was under attack, Luthor's situation was also difficult. He was attacked by gunmen 4 times within a week. The last time, Deadshot, a mercenary who had fought alongside Thea against Enchantress, succumbed to the lure of money and personally launched a long-range sniper attack on Luthor's long-haired head, but the bullet was stopped by a transparent energy shield. The underworld then pulled out of both emissions simultaneously, and both revealed some technological equipment. Whether this was intentional or passive, only they knew. As Thea had predicted, Luthor quickly shifted his focus. Uninterested in ordinary business battles, he set his sights on Superman, the recently rising superhero in Metropolis. The 2 old enemies were destined for a confrontation, even leading to the Superman-Zod battle, when a spaceship destroyed his iconic building. His arrogance was tinged with jealousy, resentment, fear, and hatred. Thea, however, was too busy, and after someone signaled her to stop, she readily withdrew the bounty. She devoted all her remaining energy to studying the Kryptonian genetic modulation map. The data itself was vast and profound, and as vast as a sea of smoke. The movie depicts Luthor covertly creating Doomsday using Zod's corpse, but that's sheer nonsense. The chances of finding data on a super or organic cell invented by ancient Kryptonian scientists amidst such a vast trove of data were less than 1 in 10 billion. Thea, with a clear goal in mind, searched for Doomsday's data. Gideon, working with a supercomputer, spent 2 days searching before finally discovering it in an obscure corner. Luthor was intelligent, supposedly possessing 9th-level intelligence, but that was only his IQ. In terms of pure computing power, he couldn't even begin to match artificial intelligence. Clearly, someone higher up was swaying his judgment. This mastermind, unsurprisingly, was Steppenwolf, Darkseid's uncle from Apocalypse. The other party certainly didn't impart Doomsday's knowledge to Luthor simply because of his perfect heavenly state and auspicious appearance. There were hidden agendas, and Thea couldn't immediately discern their intentions. She could sweep through mortals, but she wasn't impressive enough in the eyes of the new gods. She needed to plan ahead. Should she just kill Luthor? First, Luthor wasn't easy to kill. Secondly, Even if Luther died, there would still be others. Earth had a whole company of mad scientists. What was coming would come, and it wouldn't stop just because of one person's life or death. Thea didn't want to run away. She wanted to see the true extent of these new gods' power. She instructed Gideon to retrieve all the data on Doomsday. She would carefully study it to see if there were any flaws, perhaps even if she could recruit Doomsday for her own use. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 358 Stubborn Fire. No, still no. Thea pored over tens of thousands of years of Kryptonian records of Doomsday. Countless scientists had attempted to control Doomsday, to harness this biological weapon for their own ends. Genetic modification, cellular manipulation, targeted therapy, every method Thea could think of, some new to her, were tested on Doomsday. But all attempts failed. Unable to allow Doomsday's cells to grow, the scientists resorted to sealing off the Phantom Zone. Over the millennia, Doomsday had been reborn twice. Though the Kryptonians lacked Superman's current power, they had discovered his weakness, his fear of kryptonite. Both times, Doomsday was defeated by sheer force of numbers. The ancient Kryptonian god, Ra, had prophesied that Doomsday would eventually return to the light of day. To prevent a recurrence, the Kryptonian High Council had originally planned to destroy all data, but ultimately sealed it to preserve Doomsday's information for posterity. 3 conditions were required to resurrect Doomsday: his cells, a Kryptonian corpse, and Kryptonian genetic engineering. Doomsday's cells have just been retrieved by Zod and his companions from the Phantom Zone. The cells are now available. Besides General Zod, there are 4 more Kryptonian corpses than in the original timeline. There may be more bodies shattered in the explosion, making it difficult to count. Thea possesses all the genetic engineering technology. Her initial access to the data was extremely crude, more like shearing than copying. Given the crash of the spacecraft, an optimistic estimate is that only 10% of the data remains with the military. Even the 10% is incomplete and fragmented. Some contain conclusions but no deductions, while others have causes but no results. It would be incredibly difficult for Earth scientists to deduce anything from these fragments. Thea once tentatively proposed participating in research on alien technology, but the military's deniability was clear. They would only allow outsiders like Thea and Luther in if they couldn't find anything. As for Superman's participation, they'd wait until all Earthlings were dead. Everything returned to normal, and the citizens of Metropolis had recovered from the shock. Official figures put the death toll at over 1,000. But with Thea in control of the medical bay, the most conservative estimate put the death toll at no less than 5,000, with tens of thousands missing. But this was all Superman's fault, not hers. She regularly traveled to the outer planet, altering Fyra's memories until the very last moment. Initially, things went smoothly. General Zod gradually became an elder, a family member in Fyra's mind, a subconscious acceptance of this. But when it came time to switch allegiances, Thea felt strong resistance. Fyra's sense of belonging to her was truly low. Undeterred, Thea continued to increase her magical output, determined to win her over. On the first day, Fyra was unconscious, her subconscious lost her allegiance and was filled with confusion. Thea took advantage of this opportunity, with remarkable results. But on the second day, something unexpected happened. Fyra's allegiance was unexpectedly recreated in her mind, and it was none other than Thea's old acquaintance, Clark Kent. Oh my. Do you know him? Just pledge allegiance to him. They'd fought in their original timeline, after all. But in this world, Fyra had only met Superman once, when he surrendered. They weren't close at all. All that hard work training someone else's men? Thea wasn't so selfless, her magic continued to flow. On the third day, something even more devastating happened. Perhaps Fyra wasn't impressed by Superman, and her loyalty faded quickly, but she inexplicably became obsessed with a mission of continuing Krypton. It sounded noble, but Fyra's subconscious method for continuing Krypton's mission was to give Superman a monkey. Thea spat out a mouthful of blood. The thought was unsettling, it was worse than pledging allegiance to Superman. With no other choice, Thea could only awaken Fyra. To gain her unwavering support, she had to shatter her existing worldview. Destroying the worldview of Earthlings was easy, just take them to an alien planet. While dealing with this Kryptonian was more complex, there were ways to do it. Where is this? Thea withdrew the magic from Thyra's mind, the Kryptonian's powerful self-healing taking effect. She quickly sat up, looked at the purple sky outside, and asked uncertainly. If Krypton and Earth are in the southern part of the universe, this is the western part, a planet in sector 1125. At the speed of your Kryptonian ships, you can get back in about 812 years, Thea replied, hugging her shoulders. The other party didn't immediately call for war, which was good news. The general and the others, Thyra's voice returned to a calm tone, as if asking about something unrelated to her. General Zod was a true warrior. He was born and died on the battlefield. Thea had recently been researching Kryptonian genetic engineering, and the information revealed between the lines had given her some understanding of Kryptonian customs. For someone like Zod, born a warrior, dying on the battlefield is undoubtedly more honorable than dying at home. Especially since he is of the same generation as Superman's father and already quite old, the destruction of his planet and the continuation of his race have always weighed on his mind. To die on the battlefield is truly not a bad thing for him. Really? He died in battle? Thyra paused for a moment. You want me to pledge my allegiance to you? I'm sorry, but I don't see how you can help me restore Krypton's glory. You can kill me, but I won't, haha. Thyra, I once told you you're short-sighted, and it still rings true. You don't understand the true nature of this world. Do you want to go see it? Thea said with a half-smile, like a tempting devil. Thyra was genuinely captivated by her words. The true nature of the world. It sounded grandiose, but where was it? Could she see it herself? Yes, I do. I've also traveled the universe for years and conquered countless planets. You're the most boastful person I've ever met, Thyra said, looking at her sternly. Let's go to space. She walked out first, and Thyra, after a moment's thought, followed. Once they reached space, Thea opened a wormhole and took Thyra on a long-distance journey. When they crossed the 16th wormhole, the surroundings were dead silent, as if they had walked into a civilized desert. There was no more intelligent planet to be found, and no sign of life at all. Thyra couldn't hold it in any longer and asked, "Where are you taking me? The end of the world, the edge of the universe?" The continuous large-scale long-distance jumps consumed a lot of energy from her lantern ring. She had never been to this area herself. There was nothing but emptiness above, below, left, right, front and back. Only her yellow lantern ring could emit some light, allowing the two to see each other. Chapter 359 Wall of Origin. The end of the world. Thyra's mind was filled with questions. Isn't this just a philosophical concept? Does the universe really have an end? Curiosity killed the cat. Thyra felt that if she continued following Thea, she might actually see something unimaginable. This Earthling's knowledge surpassed all the Kryptonian scholars she knew. Keep going. Thea noticed her hesitation and, without further explanation, domineeringly opened a wormhole and continued to follow the coordinates in her mind. Indeed, she wanted to take Thyra to see the origin wall, the boundary of the universe. If someone could maintain their worldview after seeing the origin wall, Thea would be truly impressed. During the battle with the Parallax Demon, as the first person in the universe to simultaneously wear two colored lantern rings, the rings revealed the origin wall to Thea and left unique coordinates. Otherwise, she would never find it, even if she searched for eternity. By the time the wormhole had jumped 33 times, Thea was exhausted and almost speechless. Are you okay? Thyra asked, her tone a little shaky. It wasn't that she was worried about Thea, but that she was afraid she'd die and she wouldn't be able to get back. She hadn't learned much about space, but she knew their location was probably well beyond the limits of the universe described by Kryptonian scholars. Kryptonians could survive in space, but if anything happened to Thea, she'd be exhausted and unable to fly back. We'll be there soon. Thea feigned composure, but inwardly she was cursing. This was a bit of a pretense, because the journey was far longer than she'd imagined. She'd originally planned to bring Diana for a walk next time, but now she'd given up. Nothing happened, and she wouldn't want to make a second trip. Initially, Thea was worried about being discovered by Yuga Khan, who was stuck on the wall. He was a formidable figure who could scare Darkseid into peeing. If he hadn't insisted on sticking to the Wall of Origin, no one in the entire universe could defeat him. The Lantern Rings didn't want the inheritor of the emotional spectrum to confront this man. The coordinates they'd given Thea were among the few places where they wouldn't be seen, akin to sneaking into the village without getting shot. "We're here," Thea gasped, but Fira had lost interest in her. What was she seeing? A wall of inconceivable height and distance, woven through the void of space? Fira strained her vision, but couldn't discern its edge. Everywhere she looked was a mysterious glow, a rhythmic interplay of radiant colors. It was truly difficult to describe the wonder of the scene with simple words. "Is this the boundary you're talking about?" Fira had to admit she was stunned. If Krypton hadn't been destroyed, she wouldn't have seen anything like it in her lifetime. Thea rested for a moment before taking a closer look. This was her first time there, and she found it infinitely more sacred and solemn than she'd imagined. Even with her foresight, the vastness and mystery still overwhelmed her. In response to Fira's question, she cleared her throat. "This is what I call the boundary of the universe, the end of the world. Ancient scholars called it the wall of origin. Beyond this wall lies the source. All answers, the source of everything, lie there. Countless powerful beings have attempted to penetrate this wall and find the source, but without exception, they have all failed. Those who fail are stained by the wall itself. Currently, a peerless power is stained by the wall. We cannot address his name directly. Just remember that even the most powerful evil god in the universe turns and flees at the mere mention of his name, and you can imagine the horror of this place. So, what's your purpose in bringing me here?" Fira couldn't see how this wall related to her. "It doesn't concern you, but it does concern me. I'm still weak, but I want to see what's on the other side of the wall. What exactly is the source? If I could master it, perhaps I could alter cause and effect, change time, and bring existence to non-existence," Thea whispered, leaving the last half of her sentence unfinished. Perhaps mastering these powers would allow her to challenge those beings who cannot be named. The thought of it made her excited. Turning non-existence into existence, Fira muttered thoughtfully. Yes, on that day, perhaps Krypton's return to the universe wouldn't be a difficult feat. Your parents and friends might still be waiting for you home, just as they were before the destruction. Thea didn't know if she had such a skill, but she'd paint a picture of it first. She was determined to reach the top anyway. If she died along the way, then all would be lost. But what if she could succeed? What if she could truly embark on that path to immortality? Restoring Krypton wouldn't be a difficult task then. Fira was completely stunned. She couldn't have dreamed up such a brilliant idea. She wanted to yell at Thea, "Are you bragging?" But the endless wall before her reminded her that Thea was indeed extraordinary. Seeing her hesitation, Thea decided to deliver another drastic measure. "Do you know how Krypton was destroyed, huh?" Fira, unsure why she'd suddenly asked this question, replied, "The Earth's core destroyed, the planet exploded. We witnessed it ourselves in the Phantom Zone." "You're only describing one of the current mainstream theories," Thea continued, not giving Fira a chance to interrupt. "The Green Lanterns investigated the wreckage and found traces of activity by the advanced artificial intelligence Brainiac. There are also many alien scientists who claim that Krypton's entropy is far above normal. This doesn't seem like a natural reaction. Many believe it was man-made, which is another view." And, Thea babbled, recounting 5 or 6 possible explanations for Krypton's destruction. Seeing Fira stunned, he continued, "Do you understand? Kryptonian genetic technology has reached a point where it threatens even the most powerful. The destruction of your planet is far from simple. I can only say that the source behind the wall must hold the answers you seek." Thea extended her hand. "I'm still weak, but I truly need your assistance." Fira was torn between her own conscience and her own desires. She had received more information in just a quarter of an hour than she had in the previous 30 years. Did she really know nothing? Facing Thea's outstretched hand, she was filled with hesitation. Pledging allegiance to an outsider was unthinkable. But the prospect of restoring Krypton's glory filled her with anticipation. What should she choose? Thea didn't push her, merely holding her hand high, awaiting her response. Time ticked by, and Fira finally made up her mind. Her genes dictated that she would be a lieutenant, and only a lieutenant. Without someone to assist her, her life would be meaningless. This was a command deeply embedded in her genes, and it could not be refused. "Okay. I promise." Their hands clasped firmly, and Thea smiled with satisfaction. Chapter 360 Take You to Sunbathe. Thea was delighted to have successfully subdued Fira. This time, she'd used no magic, but she'd convinced others with simple rhetoric, a truly intoxicating feeling. While Fira's desire to revive Krypton played a decisive role, the threat of the Wall of Origin also played a significant role. It took a combination of factors for Thea to convince this Kryptonian lieutenant to surrender with just her words. It was truly difficult, Thea sighed. This Kryptonian lady's ability to fight and carry was the strength their small team lacked. Next time they teamed up for a fight, they finally had someone who could take the lead and carry the enemy. Control skills were powerful, but a team consisting entirely of control types without offensive tools would be a real bummer. Finding this incredibly powerful general finally resolved the team's predicament. Especially since his power-ups were safe and pollution-free, simply soaking him up in the sun would instantly boost his power. There was no easier way to power up than for the Kryptonians in the entire universe. As for Fyra's potential loss of control after her enhancement, Thea wasn't too worried. Kryptonians can be enhanced, and her own improvement is not slow. Superman spent 33 years on Earth to reach his current strength, so Fyra wouldn't be able to catch up to Thea in just a year or two. Furthermore, Kryptonians, due to genetic modification, tend to be straightforward. People like Superman, Supergirl, and Zod are consistent in their words and actions, bordering on pure innocence. From a shrewd perspective, 100 Kryptonians are no match for a single Earthling. Thea didn't linger long near the origin wall, recovering briefly before embarking on the return journey with Fyra. After several twists and turns, Fyra finally breathed a sigh of relief when they saw signs of a civilized planet again. She had previously worried that Thea would die from exhaustion, but now, seeing signs of intelligent life, her concerns were finally alleviated. "What did you want to say?" Thea, exhausted and needing to stop and rest periodically, asked, noticing Fyra seemed hesitant to speak. "The General's body, can you help me get it?" Fyra asked uncertainly. "Don't worry, I've got it," Thea said, pulling General Zod's body from her space ring. General Zod was Fyra's most important person. His death at Superman's hands was a civil war among the Kryptonians, and wouldn't cause much backlash. But if his body were dismembered by Earthlings, Fyra would definitely not approve. So Thea approached the Black Minister early to request the body. Earth scientists were more focused on spacecraft and less concerned with corpses. And Thea had a habit of sending alien corpses for burial, like Abinsu in the Green Lantern incident. When the minister heard she only wanted one body, he gave it a quick thought and agreed. Zod's neck had been broken by Superman, but he bore no other wounds. He lay peacefully in his coffin, as if asleep. Fyra gently stroked Zod's coffin, silent for a long time. "Where do you want him buried?" Thea waited a moment before asking. "Do you know the original coordinates of Krypton?" Yes, Thea not only knew about this famous place, she and Diana had even visited it. They soon arrived at the site of Krypton's explosion. The original planet was long gone, replaced by countless fragments of the planet and space junk, a messy sight. A testament to the once powerful civilization that existed there. "Thank you." Fyra found the largest fragment of the planet and buried General Zod on this ancestral land. Then, turning back, she sincerely thanked Thea. "What are you talking about? We're partners from now on." After resolving all the problems, Thea returned to Earth with Fyra and found an unoccupied house in Star City. "Take off your helmet," Thea commanded domineeringly. Fyra was stunned. Only after Thea explained did she realize she was being asked to get some sun. Despite her confusion, she removed her helmet. Ugh! Fyra's Kryptonian cells, exposed to the yellow sun's direct rays for the first time, were activated by the sunlight. A flood of information flooded her mind, and she uttered a cry before fainting. It was obvious. Her reaction to the sunlight for the first time revealed that Fyra's combat talent was far inferior to Zod's. Captain Zod, though dazed by the sunlight, remained conscious and could walk a few steps with support. Fyra, however, fainted instantly. The difference was stark. Thea materialized some tables and chairs, set her down, and waited for her to wake up. It took a full 2 hours for Fyra to finally wake up, but her condition was far from perfect. Her eyes were blurry, and her voice was shaky. Thea dragged her into a room made of pure lead, and only then did Fyra finally breathe a sigh of relief. "What's wrong with me?" Fyra asked weakly. "You Kryptonians can increase your power by absorbing the yellow sun, with no upper limit. This is a unique gift in the entire universe," Thea said with some envy. Fyra didn't have the energy to argue. She shook her head, unwilling to speak. Huh? She didn't know? Thea rubbed her chin, pondering, and finally realized that the sequence was wrong. She had kidnapped her. Fyra didn't see Superman and Zod's battle. She didn't realize how powerful the Kryptonians were. This was easy enough. She simply retrieved the satellite footage of the battle and showed it to Thyra. When she saw Zod flying through the air and the ground, his eyes emitting heat rays, Thyra was stunned. She turned to Thea, the knowledgeable one, hoping for further explanation. Thea pointed at the screen. That guy in the blue tights and red cape is Kal-El you're looking for. You've seen him before. He's lived on Earth for 33 years. Now, Earthlings call him Superman because his powers are so immense, and the one fighting him is General Zod. He was in the same situation as you are now, directly exposed to the yellow sun, which gave him such earth-shattering power. You see, this is the true power of the Kryptonians. As long as the yellow sun lasts, your powers can rise infinitely. Do you understand what this means? Thea asked. Thyra shook her head blankly, indicating her ignorance. If there were 1,000 or 100 Kryptonian warriors like you, there would be no place for other races in the universe. Knowing this, do you still think Krypton's destruction was an accident? Thea asked sternly. Thyra was speechless. In just one day, she had learned so much she had never known before. Her once sharp mind was now a mess, with little ability to think clearly. Chapter 361 Sinestro's Surprise. Kryptonians' initial exposure to sunlight is primarily due to the overwhelming amount of information they absorb in a short period of time, causing them to faint. Once Thyra acclimated and blocked out unnecessary information, all that remained was a sense of comfort. Super senses, heat rays, freezing breath, super strength, speed, endurance, and, astonishingly, super recovery. The two occasionally sparred, and Thea once attempted to attack Thyra with magic, but their superior recovery was somewhat frustrating. Even if her magic controlled her opponent, it was useless. Warriors like Zod and Thyra, veterans of countless battles, possessed considerable willpower and limited spell control, making it difficult to inflict fatal damage within the limited time available. To put it in perspective, Kryptonians possessed exceptionally long health bars and rapid recovery. Without kryptonite to weaken them, they were practically invincible. Often, after unleashing a barrage of spells, the damage sustained was negated by their immense recovery, and by the time their opponent regained consciousness, nothing had happened. If kryptonite were not present in this world, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Kryptonians were gods walking the earth. After Thyra adjusted to her newfound strength, Thea brought her to Karuga. So, these are your new men. Thea and Sinestro met again, each looking over their shoulder, speechless. Sinestro's previous two recruits had been normal men, perhaps finding Thea's previous recruits, dead men and evil gorillas, to be unconventional and cool. This time, he'd taken the trouble to find two men with unique character traits, hoping to test their abilities. But Thea's unexpected shift to a more conventional approach left his competitive spirit reeling like a punch in the air. Looking at Sinestro's new recruits, Thea marveled at the sheer wonder of the universe. One, called Sludge, was a cellular organism with a corrosive fluid outer membrane and the bones of its enemies within. Normally, it lay on the ground like a lump of green, barely maintaining a human form during battle. The other creature was even more terrifying. It was a deadly virus, normally as tiny as a speck of dust. According to Sinestro, it was developed for war on a high-tech planet. They continually iterated on it, eventually creating an intelligent supervirus. This was the microbe before Thea, which named itself Dysporius. Is your new subordinate a Kryptonian? After all these years on Krypton, there are still survivors. Sinestro had initially assumed Thyra was from Earth, but a lantern ring scan gave him a slight surprise. She was a remnant of a destroyed planet, just as rare as his own. Fear was growing in the universe, and the accumulation of yellow energy was increasing. Sinestro had crafted numerous lantern rings to help him avoid the shabby living he once did. He tossed a yellow ring to Thyra. The Kryptonians' technological weapons are impressive, but their combat effectiveness isn't high. I agree to your joining the Legion, but you have to show my men some of your skills, Sinestro said sternly as the two began to leave. Ha! Thea nearly burst out laughing at this. Kryptonians aren't very powerful? That's because you don't understand Kryptonian anatomy. Let's show Captain Sinestro what a weak Kryptonian can do, Thea said, scheming Thyra to demonstrate their strength. Thea and Thyra had previously discussed their current discord. And she'd also discussed her ambition to control the Yellow Lantern Corps. Thyra naturally understood what she needed to do. Intimidate. Use absolute strength to overwhelm everyone. Only then could she take control of the Corps after Sinestro. The reason Thea asked Thyra to join the Yellow Lanterns was because of a lesser-known Yellow Lantern feature, Kryptonian recharge. This feature doesn't apply to any other species, only Kryptonians. What if you're fighting on an alien planet and your energy levels are depleted due to lack of sunlight? Ring recharge. What if you're damaged by kryptonite and your power is at rock bottom? Ring recharge. The term perpetual motion machine is used to describe Kryptonians who wear Yellow Lantern rings. Their only limitation is their inherent strength, invulnerability to setbacks, and limited resistance to fear. Therefore, Thea crafted a magic ring for Thyra from the remains of the shark god Camo, imbued with a fear resistance effect. Whenever Thyra wears the ring, she remains immune to fear. Thyra, instead of wearing the ring, flew up on her own. Then, under Sinestro's bewildered gaze, she descended rapidly and slammed her fist into the ground. Boom! The area within a radius of dozens of miles was violently shaken, and a massive crater, hundreds of meters deep and thousands of meters in diameter, appeared in the area directly affected by her attack. Are you kidding me? Sinestro was stunned. Could this woman have such immense strength? Without prior preparation, he wouldn't have been able to withstand such a blow. After all, apart from the ring's power, he was just a determined alien, devoid of any supernatural powers. Sinestro had previously ordered a duel with Thea's newcomer. Seeing Thyra's powerful punch, the sludge naturally scurried back. The super virus had taken cover, and Thea's eye of horror searched for it before discovering it was outrunning the sludge. Thyra, undeterred, soared high into the sky again, her eyes ablaze with crimson, and her heat rays shot towards the nearby mountain. The heat rays hissed as they struck a mountainside, and the smoke and dust cleared, revealing the Yellow Lantern Corps symbol etched into the face. Not bad, Thea cheered loudly for her companions. She casually cast a luminescence spell, and the symbol on the mountainside glowed brilliantly yellow. From a distance, it looked like a holy place. Not bad, not bad, Sinestro offered a few half-hearted compliments, and finally breathed a sigh of relief after watching the two leave Karuga. Those who had once been determined to defect, now hesitated. He was honestly astonished that a little-known Kryptonian could be so powerful. Could there be even more powerful races in the universe, beings capable of flight and flight through pure strength, without the need for emotional energy? Right now, everything was governed by the Green Lanterns. If they were eliminated, the task of maintaining order would fall on him. Sinestro hesitated. If 100 or 80 Kryptonians like the one just now arrived, how would he withstand them? He had seen the performance of his men. They had run so fast. With their help, he wouldn't even know how he died. It seemed his defection would have to be delayed. Sinestro couldn't help but think that he needed a few loyal men. Chapter 362 The Past. Unaware that Thyra's powerful performance had caused Sinestro to hesitate for a while, Thea tested Thyra's manifestations on the way. While the Kryptonian lieutenant's imagination was far superior to Grodd's, most of her manifestations involved technological weapons, which were merely average. Her own strength far exceeded her physical capabilities, and the lantern ring merely provided her with restorative energy. Replenishing energy lost in battle with the power of emotion would have seemed like a fantasy to Thyra a few days ago, but her worldview had been so shattered that she silently accepted this unscientific explanation. Upon their return to Earth, Thea offered her no work, simply telling her to acclimate to life there. Thyra was content to absorb the yellow sun daily and see her power growing. However, problems soon arose. Superman possessed a superhuman mind, capable of studying every medical tome on Earth in just 5 minutes, mastering what others would take 10 years to learn. Thyra wasn't a fully fledged Superman. Her lieutenant's genetic engineering had given her a bit of versatility. Compared to her Kryptonian cousins, she was a capable learner, but the gap between her and Superman, who had a natural birth, was significant. Thea drew a vial of blood from her. The needle was, of course, made of kryptonite. The original spaceship had been split in two to modify Earth's climate, and the kryptonite had sunk into the Indian Ocean. Now, the spaceship hadn't gone anywhere, having crashed in Metropolis, spreading the kryptonite everywhere. While rescuing people, Thea had managed to secretly collect a significant amount. Leaving Thyra to study on her own, Thea returned to her lab. She had already earned her master's degree and was pursuing a doctorate in biogenetics. Divine blood was hard to come by, and Thea had always wished to ensure that Malcolm and Moira lived healthy and happy lives. Of course, if she was in a good mood, she would even bring her two brothers along. Malcolm was elusive, and Thea had no idea whether he'd received the divine blood. But the effects of Moira's injection were immediate. At least she looked 20 years younger, her skin regaining its radiance. Initially, Moira complained that she used to wear makeup to look younger, but now it's to look older. Unsatisfied, Thea sought solutions to problems that magic couldn't solve, turning to science. Coincidentally, the Kryptonian genetic engineering map fell into her hands, and she naturally had to put in some effort. While she didn't have Superman's superhuman mind, Thea's learning ability far surpassed Fyra's. Combining this with Earth's knowledge, Thea had already formulated a preliminary genetic optimization solution. It was perfectly compatible with Earth's technological environment. The Kryptonian genetic engineering map merely provided a path forward, but Thea didn't stop there. She needed Fyra's blood to extract a substance from Kryptonian cells to create the supergenetic optimization solution. Who is it? That day, Thea re-entered her lab and discovered traces of a stranger. Her lab was kept secret, known only to a few close associates. Click, Thea flipped on the light and saw a young woman in a wheelchair slowly sliding out from the side of the lab bench. The young woman lowered herself to a low position and said softly, "Miss Quinn, I'm here to ask for your help. Please help me." "Oh," Thea muttered, but nothing more. She knew this woman. Maisie Graves, Luthor's secretary and bodyguard. She'd been seriously injured in the previous spaceship crash, and it was Superman who had rescued her from the wreckage, while Thea's medical bay had kept her alive. Was she acting so vulnerable now to gain sympathy? Maisie's demeanor was incredibly wretched, as if all the misfortunes in the world had befallen her. In an idle drama, she'd definitely be the heroine. Unfortunately, Thea knew her record. She'd been able to fight Deathstroke, and even the most devastating blow wouldn't have caused her to act like this. Sensing a tense between them, the secretary realized her first tactic had failed. She put on a scowl, her expression expressionless. Her attempt at sympathy failing, she began to explain the situation. "My legs are completely broken. Mr. Luthor said he wants to amputate them and install mechanical ones, but I can't bear to part with them." The secretary's words were incoherent, and the tears that had been welling up in her eyes burst forth. Thea glanced over. Though still covered in scars, the secretary's legs, after rigorous training, were straight and beautiful. Considering her appearance, it seemed a pity to have them amputated. Even knowing he was up to no good, Thea couldn't help but ask, "Mr. Luthor is incredibly intelligent, and if he can't help, why are you looking for me, Mr. Luthor asserts that your medical pod must have an improved version, and I believe him." The secretary's eyes still gleamed, but her tone, filled with admiration, didn't sound like Luthor's words, but rather the words of a true god. Thea chuckled and pointed at her. "You admire your Mr. Luthor so much? Why did you come to me for help? You know, he's my competitor. He's used all sorts of tricks behind the scenes. Why should I help you?" As she spoke, Thea's tone grew harsher, her usual smile gone. Her eyes now held on to a terrifying look. The secretary held her head down for just 2 seconds. It wasn't that she was timid, it was simply that Thea's gaze was too terrifying. She looked away, but the fear didn't dissipate. The immense mental pressure nearly broke her. But the fact that she was chosen by Luthor showed she was truly superior. She gripped the wheelchair handles tightly, biting her lips until blood dripped onto her clothes. She didn't beg for mercy, but silently endured the overwhelming pressure in her mental world. HMPH, Thea withdrew her mental threat. This secretary's willpower was truly remarkable. From Thea's observation, only a few ordinary people without enhancements could reach this level, such as Nightwing and Barbara. Laurel and Tommy might not even reach this level, and of course, even the likes of Batman were out of the question. "You are indeed not an ordinary person. My judgment was correct," the secretary said breathlessly. Of course, Thea would not admit it. "This is just simple psychological suggestion," the secretary ignored her excuse. Mr. Luthor once consciously collected information on all the special people in the world. I was responsible for this work. This lady has been with you frequently in recent years." With that, the secretary tossed Thea a large file bag. Thea pulled out the first page, and what came into view was an old black and white photo. It was the one of Diana and Steve and the others in that Belgian village after defeating the German soldiers. Chapter 363 Mercy. Great stuff. Thea glanced around. Not being a photographer, she couldn't tell if it was an original. Her only regret was that she'd been concerned about the timeline. Otherwise, she'd kept a photo and given it to Diana today. It would have been fun reminiscing about the past. Although the photo was of Steve, Thea didn't tear it up like they did in the TV series. It was a keepsake. After all, it would have been a shame to tear it up. She pulled a few more sheets from the file bag. They were all shots of Diana in the city, both frontal and side views, along with numerous records of the people she'd interacted with. The secretary had compiled them with meticulous detail, detailing what was said, when, what accent, the climate, the clothing, and so on, recreating the scene in minute detail. There were even a few photos featuring Thea. Despite her caution, Diana didn't mind. Thea didn't want the date to feel like a thief, so she tried to be discreet at first, but then just let it go. So it wasn't surprising that Luther's satellite had captured her. Secretary, what do these things actually mean? Thea flipped through them. On the day of the battle with the Parallax Demon, the scene was shrouded in a yellow fog. Satellites around the world only captured blurry silhouettes, with no confirmed footage left. This is why Superman is considered the first superhero. The previous footage seemed too fake, while the Superman vs. Zod battle is clear and undeniably real. The secretary couldn't quite grasp the details of the relationship between Thea and Diana, so she could only go by her preconceived notion. She felt Thea was perhaps more dominant, so she mumbled, "Your companion's appearance hasn't changed in 100 years. Is that because?" Thea checked her watch. After half an hour of rambling with the secretary, she grew annoyed. "Even if I could heal you, are you sure you could still earn Luther's trust?" Thea had considered bribery as an insider, but it was just a thought. Luther couldn't help but suspect something. The secretary's reaction wasn't what she'd expected. Her voice remained calm, but with a hint of bitterness. "I'm asking you for help, but no matter what the outcome, Mr. Luther won't trust me. Then you're crazy for coming to me." Thea sometimes felt that heroes and villains alike were all idiotic. Luther and the secretary before her both looked shrewd, but one fancied himself a god, and the other was downright paranoid. Could it be that there weren't many people in this world with normal minds? The atmosphere between them faltered, and just as Thea was about to kick her out, the secretary finally spoke. "Mr. Luther trusts no one, regardless of whether I ask for help or not. I'm impressed. Let's talk business principles. What can you do for me?" "Erase all your footage?" the secretary asked tentatively. Thea snorted. "Not enough. Erase now, but what about later? With so many satellites around the world, there were bound to be others that could capture them." This offer was too cheap. "I'll help you without betraying Mr. Luther," the secretary offered, offering what she considered a generous bargain. Honestly, Thea wasn't entirely satisfied with the offer, but after a moment's deliberation, she finally agreed. "When Luther abandons you again, come find me. I'll show you a world you don't understand. Then you'll realize how narrow-minded you are." It was the same familiar tone, the same familiar flavor, the same words he'd used to coax Fyra. But for a native Earthling, there was no need to show her the wall of origin. If she brought 100 or 80 people to watch every day, wouldn't the Yurticons on the wall leap down and slash her to death? What Thea valued wasn't her strength, but the emotional power within her. Miss Mercy Graves, like her name, Mercy, possessed a power she wasn't aware of. It was a matter of perspective. Luther's wisdom was useless. He didn't realize the power his assistant possessed. Like the fear of the Yellow Lanterns and the courage of the Green Lanterns, compassion is a vital emotion for the Blue Lanterns. They began as a clandestine lantern tribe founded in secret by Abinsu, their star region unknown to outsiders until the Blackest Night. However, Abinsu's ring contained the coordinates of this star region, which he later passed on to Hal Jordan. Coincidentally, Thea also wore this ring. Hal Jordan couldn't discern the meaning of this single coordinate, but Thea knew it must be the Blue Lantern's base. The secretary is still far from a true home. Only after experiencing another wave of abandonment can she transform her compassion and become truly useful to Thea. While Thea invested in the present with Deathstroke, Poison Ivy, and others, she invested in the future with the secretary. With a flick of her left finger, the secretary, overcome by the onslaught of consciousness, fainted. Curing her disability wouldn't be difficult. As Luther had predicted, Thea possessed a vast array of advanced medical pods. After a thorough X-ray inspection, confirming the absence of any tracking devices, Thea took the unconscious secretary through a portal and rushed to Metropolis. Deathstroke had purchased an island in the middle of a lake outside Metropolis, where a magically controlled king shark was released. With Thea's substantial funding and advanced weaponry, Deathstroke's men now numbered over 100, each a skilled tactician and resolute, capable of assassinating the chiefs and generals of small nations with ease. Boss? That's rare. Who's that behind you? Poison Ivy greeted Thea with a smile. Thea's men addressed her with a flurry of different names, boss, and some, like Fyra, who insisted on calling her general. Thea didn't mind, any name was acceptable. Thea enveloped the secretary with her psychic power. Her wheelchair, which contained too much metal, had been abandoned in Star City. For this woman, use the number 3 medical cabin. After the treatment, knock her out and send her back to Luthor Group. After Thea finished speaking, she opened the door and went back to Star City. She hadn't finished her experiment today. Oh my, what a pretty girl. Poison Ivy was a college student majoring in biochemistry after all. She had a higher level of education than those mercenaries like Deathstroke. She was in charge of several medical cabins that were not on the market. Although Poison Ivy hadn't done anything earth-shattering, she was already well known in the mercenary industry. She followed Thea's orders very thoroughly, controlling the plants and pulling the secretary into a special room. The changes in her body and personality caused by the plant toxins were happening imperceptibly. She didn't even realize that she was a completely different person. She looked around to see if anyone was paying attention to her, and took off all the secretary's clothes. Even if someone asked, her excuse would be to check her injuries. As for whether this was true, God knows. Chapter 364 Encountering a Robber. The next day, the secretary woke up to find herself back at her apartment, her wheelchair beside her bed. Feeling a little nervous, she flexed her toes, feeling the familiar sensation return. With a light roll, she sat up. The rigorous training had calmed her down. If it weren't for the clothes she was wearing, she would have suspected yesterday's experience was a dream. She stood up with a hiss, then felt a slight ache in her lower body. She reached out and felt some unspeakable marks. Thinking of Thea and Diana's relationship, she had to think twice. Although it felt a little strange, she was still thrilled to have regained her mobility. She took a few deep breaths to calm herself, then dressed and went to work at Luthor Corp. Lex Luthor ignored her, telling her to walk normally today after having had her leg amputated yesterday. He proceeded with the usual instructions and dismissed her. The secretary, who had been excited, felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over her head. Her joy vanished, leaving only a sense of misery and resentment. On the African savannah, in Ethiopia, a wooden house with no communication to the outside world. The room was filled with an alluring fragrance as Thea and Diana engaged in another long, heated, and tense competition. Magical power wasn't as effective as divine power in transforming the body, but it was still somewhat effective. Coupled with Thea's recent intense absorption of sunlight and moonlight, her physical fitness was rapidly catching up to Diana's. By now, the competition had lasted several rounds. Is the daily management of the temple okay? Diana stood up, gracefully wrapped herself in a bath towel, and asked Thea, who was combing her hair. Well, Isadora, whom you recommended, is indeed an avid believer in the moon god. Under her influence, many nearby citizens have developed a superficial faith. I can even absorb the power of faith from the temple. I'm sure my situation with the moon goddess will be much better. Thea was quite happy to mention this. Initially, the addition of water attribute to Thea's body had reduced her overall magic power somewhat in order to balance the various attributes. However, with the rededication of the Temple of Artemis, the statue Thea had left on Paradise Island, through some unknown mechanism, unexpectedly transferred a significant amount of faith power to her. This faith power, unsurprisingly, was provided by the Amazons over the past century. The amount of faith was small, but of sufficient purity. This faith power, transformed into divine power and then into magic power, greatly compensated for the previous deficiency and even increased her overall magic power. Now, Thea's 5 magic attributes flowed more smoothly and naturally. If she could find earth attribute magic to add to her body, she would form a complete internal circulation, energizing the 6 elements of light, darkness, earth, fire, water, and wind. To say it was endless was a bit of an exaggeration, but her endurance would be increased to an unimaginable level. Isadora is a member of my mother's personal guard. She has extensive combat skills and a deep faith. I'm sure her management of the temple will be a surefire success. Diana praised her recommended candidate generously. Thea remained silent. The temple had initially been a mere attraction for Diana, but later on, Thea had largely ignored it. Bruce Wayne had been responsible for everything. Presumably working so hard to repay a favor. Flipping through the documents provided by the secretary, Diana sighed at the sight of old photos. Just as she was about to speak, she sensed something and snapped, "Someone's coming." Very fast, Thea glanced out the door and exclaimed, "Amanda, how did this guy find his way here?" They exchanged glances, each a little bewildered. Luckily, Amanda arrived quickly, pushing open the door and entering the cabin alone. "It was hard finding you," Amanda said calmly, not a hint of panic. She ignored the sight of them, clad only in towels, their long, radiant legs, their flushed faces. "You've been running around so far. I've mobilized 30 satellites and 2 operational simulation analysis teams to find you." "Oh," Thea said. She and Diana hadn't intended to hide their relationship from anyone. Everything they needed to know was known, and everything they shouldn't have known would remain private. She was simply curious about why Amanda was looking for her. "Amanda, we met 3 days ago. I congratulated you on becoming the leader of the I." The Secretary of Defense had initially established himself, and Amanda quickly joined the team. With the help of the Enchantress incident, she had finally been promoted to the top position. Second in command became the boss, and the boss became second in command. She and Steve Trevor had swapped positions, going from being led to being the leader. Thea was puzzled. She must be incredibly busy right now, and being so impatient and blocking the door wasn't her style. Amanda half smiled, "I'm not looking for you. I'm looking for Miss Prince." "Looking for me?" Diana's beautiful eyebrows furrowed. In this time and space, without Steve's ties, she had virtually no connection to the Eye. Why would she be looking for her? Amanda wasn't about to play dumb. 9 hours ago, the Black Lodge was robbed. The thief was your friend, the archaeologist Minerva. She stole a dagger of unknown origin, Cheetah. Thea's mind flashed to the name. In the original time frame, Cheetah used Diana's connections to enter the Black Lodge and steal the Godslayer blade, possessed by the Cheetah god. She then stabbed herself in the chest with a dagger, becoming the supervillain Cheetah. But in this time frame, their friendship was only ordinary, and Diana had no further ties with the Eye of the Sky. Yet, Cheetah stole the Godslayer blade just as she had before. Later Cheetah could scratch the sprinting Flash and bite through Superman's skin, infecting him. All these signs indicate that she's more than just possessed. She might be possessed by the Cheetah god. Otherwise, how could a normal person transformed into a villain possess such power? It's outrageous. The surveillance footage shows she's moving incredibly fast. We tracked her for 5 hours, and she vanished into the crowd. But wherever she passed, many humans were infected, transformed into zombies under her control. I need your help. Amanda pulled out her tablet and displayed several photos of the infected. Thea took a quick look and saw Diana was involved. She knew she couldn't ignore it. This person was clearly a wicked woman who had lost her virginity. She decided to just shoot her. She pulled out her artifact longbow from her space ring and turned to Amanda, asking, "Where was she last seen?" Amanda was puzzled. "What were you going to do with a bow and arrow?" Who knew how far away that person was? Amanda didn't know Thea had super long-range sniping skills, but Diana did. She quickly grasped Thea's arm and said, "She's not a bad person. We should try to rescue her." Isadora was provided as a supporting role by book friend Yu Yanayu. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to Yu Yanayu for her long-term support. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 365 The Infected. Thea bared her teeth. This aspect of a righteous hero was so unappealing. Stubborn, it all described them. Their principle of not killing had allowed countless criminals to escape, only to escape and continue their evil ways, repeating the cycle. But she couldn't ignore Diana's feelings either. She put away her bow and arrows, and took her on a tour to make her realize the evil of the cheetah before finally killing her with a single arrow. Her vacation plans were ruined, and Thea, somewhat frustrated, reached out to Amanda. "Give me all the information. We'll take care of her, dead or alive." Amanda smiled brightly. "Preferably alive. If you catch her alive, I'll do you a huge favor." "A huge favor?" Thea's eyes rolled, thinking quickly. Sure enough, she was talking about Oliver. Using something she knew as a huge favor made Thea's heart swell. But Amanda didn't really know she knew, so overall, she was sincere. 5 years after his disappearance, the year before his return to Star City, Oliver inexplicably escaped Amanda's control. Perhaps it was this huge favor? With a lover on one side and a brother on the other, Thea had to make this journey, even if she was completely unwilling. She might as well capture him alive. In exchange for Amanda's huge favor, the two ignored Amanda, telling her to go back the way she came. Thea opened a portal directly to the spot where Cheetah had last disappeared, deep in the Louisiana forest. Neither of them were Special Forces scouts, and they couldn't detect footsteps, but Thea's Eye of Horus could see far away. She hovered in the air, observing intently. There are a few staggering figures over there. They look like the infected Amanda mentioned. Thea pointed northeast, and the two quickly flew over. Tell me, where's Minerva? Diana was also a little frustrated. She was dragged into this during a break from sparring, and naturally, she was a little angry. Seeing an infected person, they swung their lasso of truth and demanded loudly. Ho-ho! Half of the infected person's face was covered in bruises, the whites of their eyes were gleaming, and the fangs in their mouths were noticeably longer than those of an average human. As if sensing the two women's life signs, they turned their heads. Though their movements were slow, they accelerated incredibly quickly, completing a series of maneuvers, such as turning, bending their knees, and lunging, in less than a tenth of a second. Thea knew that the leopard woman was extremely fast and her attacks were infectious, so she and Diana had already changed into combat gear. While the speed of her attacks might be considered extremely fast to ordinary people, they were nothing compared to them. A powerful kick, hundreds of tons of force, struck the leading infected person, sending them crashing into more than 10 trees before collapsing. Instead of blood, a black, sticky substance gushed out of their mouths. These aren't even human, Diana said uncomfortably as the infected people lunged at them. But her movements were not slow. Thea had benefited from their weekend sparring, and naturally, she would benefit as well. While her physical growth wasn't yet visible, Diana's resistance to fear had reached an inhuman level. It was at least significantly higher than when the two women reunited. This increased resistance also boosted her resolve, reflected in her exceptional composure in battle. Regardless of any unfavorable situation, Diana could handle it with ease, using minimal effort to deliver the most devastating blow. Her attack style had been unconsciously influenced by Thea. Deadly, efficient, and concise, this was Diana's current fighting style. Compared to the unskilled shield bashing of a century ago, it was now more artistic. Thea matched her, drawing her artifact, the longbow. The two, one close combat, the other ranged, worked in perfect unison. Within 30 seconds, hundreds of infected had been defeated, and black goo flowed from their wounds, forming a murky river. It smells terrible. Thea, a bit of a germaphobe, couldn't stand it. Using her magician's hand, she gathered the bodies, dead or alive, together. The freezing lance on her power armor froze the bodies completely, finally curbing the pungent stench. What should she do next? Diana automatically turned to Thea. Just like the day they left Paradise Island, Thea didn't disappoint. The sub-control system on her arm connected to the Quinn Group's mainframe, analyzing and compiling a wealth of information. Combining it with the simple clues Amanda had initially provided, Thea determined her next target. Minerva was originally adopted by a woman named Lita in Idaho. She seems to run a religious school. Let's go there and see if there are any leads, Diana agreed, and the two continued flying northwest. The school was located in a remote area, surrounded by mountains. Many locals' faces paled when they mentioned it, and they all refused to talk about it. Through a mixture of fear and hints, Thea finally got the exact address from an old man. Since they were searching for clues, the two naturally didn't just fly over. Instead, they changed into casual clothes and drove a jeep, looking like adventure enthusiasts on a quest. Stop. This is our private territory. The two women drove to a wooden fence, where a fierce woman holding a submachine gun stopped their car. When it came time to show off their acting skills, it was usually Shah who approached them, and this time was no exception. Shia's eloquent nonsense, about lost travelers, philanthropic female college students, and whatever harmless she said, the fierce woman at the gate actually believed her and opened the gate to the camp amid Shia's enthusiastic thanks. Once inside the wooden fence, they discovered a large space. The inhabitants were surprisingly women, young and old, with varying hair and eye colors. The only exception was their clothing, coarse linen dresses. Children carried baskets, and adult women held various tools. Only a few fierce-looking women held rifles. Aside from a few rifles, Thea saw no other modern equipment. These women were living a medieval life in the 21st century. But she didn't look any further. Her gaze was automatically drawn to a statue standing in the square. A girl with antlers, holding a bow and arrow. Thea looked at Diana and saw she was looking back at her. It was incredible. The statue was of Artemis. In other words, these people had traveled all the way to America to worship an ancient Greek deity. That's not right. After all, Thea was a chosen one, and her perception of the goddess was higher than Diana's. She quickly discovered the problem. The statue lacked any trace of holiness or divine power. Combined with the ascetic attire of the people around her, she knew it wasn't their lack of piety, but something else was going on. Chapter 366 Cheetah God. Thea carefully studied the expressions of the women around her. Pain, numbness, and cruelty mingled in a cacophony of emotions, making it difficult to discern their true feelings. The only thing that was certain was that none of them were happy. This contradicted the teachings of the moon goddess, who advocated cheerful forest maidens. This group before her was a far cry from joy. What should we do? Diana gave Thea a subtle, questioning look, her tone clear. Thea shook her head slightly. She could already sense the presence of divine power. Though faint, the sinister aura was palpable. While this place ostensibly worshipped the moon goddess, only the leaders knew the true nature of the evil deity. Ms. Lita, which deity do you enshrine in the center of the plaza? Aren't you Christians? Thea asked the elderly woman in the lead, knowing full well that she was the nominal sponsor of the school and the adopted mother of Minerva the leopard. The old woman pretended to be kind, but as her lips parted, her fangs flashed a piercing coldness in the moonlight. We are an ancient people, known to the world as the Amazons. We worship the goddess of the moon and the hunt. Fuck, have you any shame? Thea's expression was etched with obvious suspicion, but with her exceptional acting, she quickly transformed it into shock. Her shock was fake, while Diana's was genuine. Diana, who had been feigning expressionlessness, couldn't help but examine the old woman from head to toe. Sadly, she couldn't detect a single trace of the aura that matched Paradise Island. Thea, a faker meeting the real deal, didn't know what to say to these imposters, but could only gape in astonishment. The old woman observed their expressions and found them perfectly normal. This was the demeanor of a modern American thrill-seeking college student, and their camp had already hosted many such young people. Clap, the old woman clapped her hands joyfully, and a swarm of women armed with bows and iron tools instantly surrounded the two. Come join our hunt. You city dwellers should fully enjoy the joys of nature. Come on, run. The old woman gestured to the crowd to clear a path deeper into the forest, gazing maliciously at her two prey, expecting them to panic. However, the two acted as if they hadn't heard or seen anything. Thea scanned the area, seeing that the enemy's bows and arrows were all stone-pointed, and the men pulling them were all frail women. Not to mention the two non-humans, even Tommy Laurel could easily outmaneuver them. Unlike Diana, while she possessed the god's gifts, they were innate. No study was needed, only knowledge was required. Thea's divine power was pieced together, scraping a little from one person, absorbing a little from another. Her mastery of divine power was unparalleled. While there were some fluctuations of divine power at the camp, it was largely emanating from this area. None of the women present met the requirements to become hosts. She had originally planned to play the fool and trick the old woman, but she was too pushy. Her fangs were exposed before she could even get a few words out. Xia had to abandon her initial plan. You like violence? Then we'll play along. The old woman stood there, pretending to be a cultist, but she found the woman was not afraid at all. Strange? The young men from the previous day would have wet their pants and run away trembling, so why weren't these two women afraid? A whispered voice drifted through the air, as soft as the wind, but it struck her like thunder. She reacted instantly and ordered, attack. Although the women found this unusual, they mechanically drew their bows and released arrows. Dozens of arrows swarmed towards the two women. This level of attack seemed like a joke to them. Xia raised her left hand, and a small whirlwind appeared around them, sucking in all the arrows. With a squeeze of her left hand, the whirlwind trembled violently, shattering the arrows caught in the wind. Blasphemers! Kill them! The old woman screamed, backing away violently. Thea couldn't bear to see her flee. Dear, asked the guy. Diana, already pent up, hurled her lasso of truth, tying the old woman like a dumpling and pulling her back to the two of them. Kill them, kill them, the old woman, still in midair, roared in fury. If it weren't for her earlier flight, One would have thought she'd rather die than surrender. The leader was instantly captivated, but he didn't dampen the remaining women's enthusiasm. Their once still faces were replaced by a frenzy, their eyes gleaming with cold as they charged towards the two women. Even many children picked up stones and tried to attack them. Back off, Thea unleashed her full might. A wave of fear, centered around her, instantly radiated outward in an invisible wave. The women closest to her were paralyzed by fear, while those farther away stumbled, their minds clearly wounded, their bodies still controlled by the evil spirit, ready to continue their attack. Pretty tenacious, Thea observed her results. Unsurprisingly, the evil deity here was the so-called cheetah god. Ironic, the prey impersonating the hunter to enjoy offerings. It was unclear whether this creature was a Native American deity or some totemic animal spirit akin to Africa. I'll give you an even bigger surprise. Thea donned the yellow lantern ring, amplifying her emotions 100-fold. Using the Martian Manhunter's method, she unleashed a far-reaching mental shockwave. The invisible shockwave swept through everyone like a hurricane. This time, everyone present, near or far, young or old, lay dead, save for Diana, who had sparred with her and possessed a terrifyingly high fear resistance. While these individuals were unharmed physically, their minds, controlled by the evil deity, effectively absorbed the full force of the shockwave. All they needed to do was rest afterward. But the evil god was in dire straits. His consciousness, divided into hundreds to control these followers, was his greatest weakness. His original consciousness might have been able to withstand Thea's mental assault, but now divided, his resistance had been weakened 100-fold. It was doubtful he could have resisted. The crackling sound was subtle at first, but grew louder. A gaping crack appeared in the statue of the goddess of the hunt, and a pure black cheetah tumbled out. Its eyes still shone with wisdom, but they dimmed quickly, as if trying to memorize Thea and the others' appearances. Then, it collapsed, unable to rise again. Chapter 367 Leopard Girl. Is he dead? Diana asked. Thea examined him carefully for a long moment. Judging from this corpse, he's indeed dead. The mental strain was too great for a short period of time, and his soul was crushed. But at the moment of his demise, he used some secret method to abandon this body. If I'm not mistaken, your friend Minerva is the new host. Thea's judgment wasn't groundless. The evil aura lingering in the surrounding land, sky, and jungle was rapidly dissipating. As for the women impersonating Amazons, she didn't bother to worry about them. When they regained consciousness, they would suffer a serious illness, but being free from this evil land would be a good thing for them. Do you still want to ask about this person? Diana asked, holding up the old woman in her hand. The old woman was closest, and coincidentally, she carried the most evil aura, bearing the brunt of it. Facing Thea's mental shock, amplified 100-fold, she fainted without resistance. Thea scratched her head. She had indeed forgotten about this person, but it wouldn't have been appropriate to use an area of effect attack in that situation. It was just bad luck for the old woman. Let her go. You ask? I'll handle the body. Thea lowered her head and groped Black Panther's corpse. There wasn't much divine power left in this body, and Thea speculated that perhaps it had been transferred to Leopard Woman. But this corpse was truly divine, slightly higher in rank than the shark god Camo, whom Thea and her team of 5 had previously taken down. Taking it back and crafting it into new armor would surely be very effective. Since they hadn't engaged directly, Thea was worried the other party wasn't completely dead. What if he was faking his death? Or, like in those melodramatic TV dramas, he'd come back to life later? Pulling out an alien cutter and attaching a portable power source, she began working on the spot, dismembering the Black Panther's corpse. With a body scattered like this, if he could still be resurrected, Thea would write a letter of admiration to him. Summoning water magic, she rinsed the dirty water off her hands, and Diana's questioning quickly concluded. This old woman says she ordered Minerva to steal the god-slaying sword. It was also under her command that Minerva pierced her chest with a sword and transformed into the half-human, half-beast monster. But she doesn't know Minerva's exact whereabouts, only that she's heading south. Diana put away her lasso. The old woman, having witnessed Thea's brutal dismemberment of the leopard's body, seemed to have a sudden realization, her mind on the verge of collapse. Still heading south? Thea was a little frustrated. They'd found his camp north from Louisiana, and now they were almost in Canada, heading south again. It was a toss-up. But seeing the reluctance in Diana's eyes, Thea had no choice but to accompany her in pursuit. in the Brazilian rainforest. I hate this place. To prevent a sudden attack from the leopard woman, the two of them pursued her fully armed, tracking her from the northwestern United States to southeastern Brazil. The rainforest climate was unbearable for Thea, the heat and humidity were stifling. The two dared not fly, fearing they would lose the target due to the dense vegetation. The only good news was that Gideon had already collected all the data on the target, footprints, hair, speed per second, and walking patterns. Later, an artificial intelligence would calculate the target's route using Quinn's satellites and supercomputers, frequently correcting its course based on the footprints and other traces. Without Gideon's calculations, Thea and Diana would have been dreaming of tracking the leopard woman, who had avoided human society and only scurried through the jungle. The climate here is unbearable, Diana said. She was familiar with the African savanna and the Mediterranean climate, but the humidity of the tropical rainforest was completely unaccustomed. She felt like she was perpetually sweating, but her divine physique was far superior to that of a human, making it impossible to sweat. As they advanced, they suddenly noticed something unusual and exchanged glances. As the trace disappeared, Diana removed her shield, grasping her sword with one hand, and surveyed her surroundings warily. Thea, no longer concerned with her magic power consumption, focused her eye of Horus on searching for any suspicious figures. West, Thea shouted, her arm's frost gun blasting out streams of icy air. A golden figure flashed past her, a 5-centimeter gash in its nuclear-proof chest armor. Thea, Diana hurriedly shielded her flank, lashing out with her lasso. Unfortunately, the opponent was too fast, and after missing, he retreated into the trees, preparing for another sneak attack. The easiest way to deal with such a fast creature is to fly high and bombard it from above, but Thea and her team still needed to capture him, which required some maneuvering. "You're not coming out, are you?" the two men grumbled, but the opponent remained calm, silently biding his time. Thea and Diana had established a telepathic connection, allowing them to discuss plans at any time during battle without worrying about the other's alertness. Darkness, Thea gathered all her magical power and suddenly unleashed it all. This spell was her most proficient. Though low level, it could sometimes be effective. A pitch-black fog enveloped the area for miles. Though Thea couldn't see, she could sense the magic she was emitting, and she soon spotted the leopard woman hiding among a pile of dead leaves. The woman was stunned by the sudden darkness, but her bloodlust kept her from fleeing. Instead, she fiercely fought, determined to kill both women. Thea's magic sensed her cautious approach. "You bastard. Am I a pushover? This time, I'll take your life," Thea instructed Diana in a telepathic conversation. Then, judging by her vision, the leopard woman was 3 meters away. She stared intently at her, bent to the knees, about to attack, when Thea instantly unleashed another spell, light. A blindingly bright light blazed in the pitch darkness, completely unprepared for leopard woman. She was staring intently at Thea, her eyes wide, fearing she'd evade her blows with agility. She rammed through several scenarios, preparing for any eventuality. But none of these scenarios presupposed Thea dodged her attacks, otherwise, all her efforts would be futile. Leopard woman considered numerous possibilities, but unfortunately, she overlooked the versatility of spells. A low-level spell like light, while even Damien, let alone Thea, could cast instantly, was unprepared for this possibility. The intense light instantly hid her retinas, causing her pupils to constrict and her eye muscles to spasm. Leopard woman instinctively covered her eyes with her hands. Diana coordinated perfectly with her, striking down with her shield. Meanwhile, Thea continuously cast mud and grease spells, unleashing dense webs among the trees, all with one goal, to slow her down. Chapter 368 Capture. Catwoman's vision was temporarily blocked. Though the burning sensation in her eye continued to cloud her judgment, she managed to dodge Diana's attack, relying on her beastly instincts. Unaware of the barrage of grease spells thrown by Thea, Catwoman naturally took a step back to avoid Diana's lunge. Her footing felt like it was slick with grease. Normally, with her balance, she could have easily trotted across grease, but the swelling and pain in her eye severely compromised her sense of balance. She stumbled, struggling to maintain her balance, and Diana struck her shoulder with a sword, gushing yellow blood. Seeing that they had already engaged, Thea retracted her darkness spell, a move Diana had previously agreed with her. Catwoman and Diana hadn't had a close relationship in this dimension, but they were more or less friends, and Diana felt obligated to lend a hand. However, Close association breeds closeness, and Thea brought out a bit of the dark side in the otherwise upright Diana. Her goal was to create a fair fighting environment, and Thea faithfully fulfilled that mission. Over a radius of several miles, Thea unleashed nearly 50 slowing spells. Fearing a potential comeback, she exploited her opponent's stumble to cast a gravity spell and a slowing spell. She dug 2 deep pits along the path she must have passed, and strung several ropes at ankle height between trees. She employed every trick she could muster against the blind. Even if the leopard woman escaped, the memory of today's events would surely haunt her. The leopard woman's vision was blind, a churning of iron rods stirring in her head. Her feet tumbled over debris, her body feeling as if she were carrying dozens of pounds of lead. This was the fair duel Thea had created for her lover. Retracting the darkness spell, Thea finally saw the leopard woman's dignity. True to her half-human, half-beast reputation, she possessed pointed ears and fangs, her nails replaced by sharp claws, her body a smeared, scorched brown animal skin, and a long tail trailing behind her. Her ferocity rating would have been 70 points, but the only downside was that her yellow pupils, which should have radiated a menacing glow, somewhat tarnished her overall image. Facing Diana's onslaught, Leopard Woman had no time to rub her eyes. Her aching eye muscles triggered her tear ducts, and tears flowed uncontrollably. Diana's attacks were now rhythmic, not relentlessly aggressive, creating the illusion of a narrower power gap. Leopard Woman, inexperienced in combat, fell for the trick. Blindly aware of 2 nearby enemies, she knew nothing about Thea's actions and could only lash out at Diana, attempting to force a one-on-one situation. Diana's defense was unparalleled in the multiverse, and Thea had never seen anyone better with a shield. Facing Leopard Woman, whose speed had been reduced by half, she fought with remarkable composure. Blocking, parrying, and dodging, she seamlessly integrated her agility and martial arts skills. If it weren't for the awkward timing, Thea would have applauded. Leopard Woman's attack proved unsuccessful, and she was burdened by the chaotic surroundings. Her physical and mental strength quickly drained, and she realized she couldn't continue like this. With a feint, she forced Diana back, then, without even considering the direction, she turned 180 degrees and prepared to flee. But she only took 2 steps before she was caught in a sticky trap. A full sprint would have surely shattered the web, but with only 2 steps to go, she had no speed. She was more agile than strong, and with a powerful swing of her arms, she used her sharp claws to forcibly cleave the web that held her captive. But the second she lost allowed Diana to catch up. "Diana, let me go, aren't we friends?" Leopard Woman had no idea how many webs surrounded her. The large pits and trip ropes in the ground had annoyed her. She didn't want to stay in this place for even a second longer. Her cunning nature prevented her from forcing her out, so she immediately switched her soft approach. "Minerva, I'm helping you. Come back with me and face judgment. You can't keep making these mistakes," Diana said sincerely. "It's Diana, I think it smells a bit like yours." "I didn't expect I'd guess right," Leopard Woman's nose twitched. "Is this your true power, which you always hide? My God said you're an immortal, a being on a higher plane of existence than us ordinary people? Is that right?" Diana fell silent. No answer seemed appropriate to this question, so she chose to remain silent. "It was your companion who created this battlefield, wasn't it? A supernatural being too? I'm so envious." Leopard Woman's tone was stern, not envy at all, but jealousy, a deep-seated envy. "Come back with me and atone for your sins. You still have hope." Diana tried to steer the conversation back. "Haha," Leopard Woman's laugh was terrifying, 3 parts human, 7 parts beast, her humanity rapidly fading. "Atonement? Me? What sin have I committed? I've become this, I can't go back. Put away your love, Diana. You can't save me," Panther Woman lashed out, her expression frantic as she attacked Diana with both hands and feet. Taking advantage of the pauses in conversation, she had regained some of her vision and strength. She felt Diana's strength was about the same as when she was weak, and she wanted to launch a sudden attack, finishing her. However, she underestimated Diana and overestimated herself. The torrent of attacks was completely blocked, and the little strength she had recovered was wasted. "How can you be so strong? I've sacrificed so much, and yet I'm not as good as you." Panther Woman was consumed by rage. Jealousy, resentment, and injustice all converged, and her attacks intensified. She forgot about escaping, and only wanted to give in to her bloodlust and kill Diana. Negotiations failed, and Diana, feeling she had done her part in their fragile friendship, finally stopped holding back, unleashing the power of the protective silver bracelet. Catwoman managed to hold out for the first few blows, but after 10, Diana's power and speed seemed to soar with no end in sight. While not reaching Catwoman's maximum speed, it was more than enough to handle her now. The Vulcan sword, sensing its master's fighting spirit, ignited with flames as it slashed and stabbed, each strike targeting Catwoman's vital points. Though Catwoman possessed the cheetah's body, it wasn't her own memories. Taking all factors into consideration, Diana completely dominated her. Give up, Diana sped up even further, taking advantage of a moment while sidestepping to strike Catwoman in the ribs. Then, she slammed her shield into the back of her head. While Catwoman was dazed, she swung the lasso of truth, binding her securely. Chapter 369 Black Manta. To prevent Cheetah from escaping, Thea froze her limbs again, leaving only her ferocious head exposed. Unless her neck could stretch, she wouldn't be able to bite the two women more than 10 meters away. Amanda was overjoyed to receive Thea's call and readily agreed to personally take over, saying Thea would see her favor soon. For Amanda, trading Oliver, the overly righteous man, for Cheetah should be a good deal, Thea reasoned. The AOD agents wouldn't appear immediately, so the two could only wait. Cheetah continued to bark and curse. Thea tried to inquire about the god-slaying dagger, but she refused to engage, only hurling obscenities at her. She didn't want to touch such a sinister weapon that could transform a healthy person into this state, so she left it to Amanda. She unleashed 15 consecutive psychic blasts, knocking Cheetah unconscious, and finally felt the surroundings quiet down. The humidity made it difficult for the two to engage in more casual conversation, so they could only engage in casual conversation. As Thea recounted her childhood surfing adventures with Oliver, a woman dressed in Arab clothing appeared in front, followed by a man in a black diving suit and a large, bizarrely shaped oxygen mask. The two engaged in a relentless exchange, fighting their way through the woods and into the clearing before Thea and the others. Leopard Woman had chosen this spot based on a comprehensive analysis of the surrounding conditions. It was the only relatively open area nearby. The two strangers naturally made the same choice, but they hadn't anticipated the presence of outsiders. The man in the oxygen mask had his head tightly covered in an oval-shaped mask, with two large red crystals covering where his eyes should be. From a distance, he looked like a giant red-eyed fly. The diving man's expression was unseen, but Thea, Diana and the Arab woman exchanged glances, each sensing confusion in the others. The Arab woman glanced at the frozen leopard woman. Unsure of the two women's origins, she kindly called out, "Run!" The man in the wetsuit behind her seemed to mistake Thea and Diana for innocent bystanders. Though he found it odd to encounter a living being in the rainforest, he ignored it and silently continued pursuing the women. He simply raised his arm toward Thea and the others. His wrist seemed to be attached to some kind of launcher, and two extremely thin metal spikes shot out between their eyebrows. In his mind, Thea and Diana were nothing more than dead bodies, not worth even a glance. But 2 seconds later, he was stunned. For a long time afterwards, whenever he thought of that encounter, he wanted to bang his head against the wall. Why did I do that? I should have just pretended I didn't see and just run, but he didn't have the ability to predict the future, and even if he did, he couldn't predict that far. The two women's appearances were incredibly deceptive. If it had been the towering Deathstroke sitting there, the man in the wetsuit wouldn't have bothered. But Thea and the others had changed back into their regular clothes after the battle, and the heat and humidity here made them feel cooler. Unarmed, they looked like two harmless, almost harmless figures. Huh? The man in the wetsuit ran over 10 meters. The expected screams and the smell of blood were gone. He was slower than the Arab woman, and only then did he spot the half-frozen cheetah. Though unconscious, her animalistic aura was still striking. "Hey! Are you Black Manta? I'm giving this back to you." Thea and Diana toyed with a steel needle he had fired. They couldn't tell what it was made of, but they could tell it was incredibly sharp. Thea toyed with it, then found it uninteresting and tossed it back. While she hadn't practiced arts like the Bat family, Thea's ranged attack stats were nearly maxed out. She was adept at any ranged attack, and this needle was no exception. The man in the diving suit whose identity was revealed was none other than Aquaman Arthur Curry's nemesis, Black Manta, a renowned treasure hunter throughout the underground world. Because Aquaman accidentally killed his father, his life's goal was only one: revenge. Using years of savings and his exceptional knowledge of mechanical engineering, Black Manta, a common man without any special powers, crafted a diving suit and a variety of deadly weapons, embarking on a solitary journey of vengeance. He was renowned in the underground world, often wearing a unique oxygen mask, and no one had ever seen his true form. Whether on land or at sea, he always wore a diving suit with an oxygen mask, and many knew him. But having his identity exposed by Thea, a young and beautiful woman, suddenly made him nervous. He cautiously dodged the steel needle thrown his way. Your strength and speed surpass those of ordinary people? Is that the amplification from your battle suit? Thea channeled her magical energy, creating a hazy mask, and her voice, shaken and distinct from her usual tone. A mutant? Another one. Are you one of Arthur's companions? Black Manta's voice was clearly ethereal, having been through a voice changer, but his tone betrayed his displeasure. Get out of here. Thea didn't want to bother with their mess. She just wanted to hand Cheetah over quickly and then go back for a good shower. But perhaps it was her tone that was a little harsh, or perhaps it was the condescending nature of her years in a high position that naturally lent itself to it. This irritated the sensitive Black Manta, who misunderstood her meaning. A surge of energy erupted from his visor, and two orange-red lasers shot out from where his eyes should be. Shit. This idiot is not going to listen. I told you to fight somewhere else. How did you take that? Thea was speechless, while Diana drew her shield and easily blocked the lasers. If they could even block Doomsday's heat rays, then these lasers, created by humanity's cutting-edge technology, would be no problem at all. It's broken. Seeing his strongest attack fail, Black Manta's heart faltered. He finally realized that these two women, dressed as passers-by, were no ordinary people. He wanted to continue pursuing the Arab woman, but Diana, with her kindness, would never let him go. Initially, the two men were in front and behind, making it difficult to determine who was good and who was evil. But now, seeing Black Manta's ruthless ferocity, he hesitated and struck down with his sword. Black Manta could only draw out two long swords to block Diana's Vulcan sword. A crisp sound reached Thea's ears, and the onlooker immediately noticed something unusual. The long swords were made of extraordinary material. They didn't seem to be made of any existing earth metal. Considering that Black Manta had used these two swords to counter Aquaman's trident in the future, and now that he could block the Vulcan sword, and considering his profession, it was easy to deduce that the metal was likely found while salvaging some underwater ruin. He is intelligent and talented, and would be an excellent subordinate, but Thea thought about it and gave up. Black Manta is obsessed with revenge, ignoring any cost and any moral values. This has become the only meaning of his existence. No matter how powerful the suggestion is, it is impossible to change this. Thea can only give up the idea of recruiting him. Chapter 370 This thing and I are destined. What a waste of talent. Thea looked at the Arab woman who had run 200 meters, realized her pursuers hadn't caught up, circled around, and then turned back. Unaware of the strength of Thea and the others, she righteously drew her machete and prepared to help. Thea quickly grabbed her. Are you kidding me? Can an Earthling defeat Diana? Black Manta was formidable, even an underwater Batman, but only with preparation, intelligence, and a wealth of custom-made high-tech equipment. That was his secret to victory. Now, with no intelligence, he was supposed to defeat a fully armored Diana on land in a diving suit? It was a pipe dream. And Thea hadn't recognized the Arab woman at first, but now she finally remembered something. She was one of Aquaman Arthur Curry's first teammates, a group of 6 called the Alien. Unfortunately, their team was woefully underpowered. 6 superpowered beings armed with 6 powerful weapons were beaten to pulp by a mere mortal, Black Manta. Thea felt confident that she could easily dispatch them with her own men, a 6-on-6 annihilation. Don't worry, my companions are formidable, Thea said, restraining the Arab woman, who was about to strike with a machete. Black Manta is a renowned hunter. The Arab woman's words were cut short as Diana, already possessing an overwhelming advantage, opened her mouth to speak, but the words faltered. Diana vastly surpassed Black Manta in strength, speed, and skill. Black Manta was no martial arts expert, merely a vengeful engineer and treasure hunter. He was no match for her. Lasers, fishing nets, hydrojet lances, everything was used, but his attacks, while effective against Aquaman's team, were useless against Diana. The only thing worth mentioning was his diving suit. It was made of an unknown material, but Diana spotted a flaw and slashed at it with her Vulcan sword at an angle. The immense force impacted the soft suit, leaving a noticeable dent. However, The suit's exceptional toughness and density allowed a slight dent, which then quickly rebounded, leaving no trace of the damage. Is it puncture-proof or slash-proof? Diana sheathed her shield, feinted with her left foot, and as Black Manta dodged sideways, she clenched her right fist and struck him in the abdomen. The opponent was merely a human. She hadn't used the power of her protective silver bracelet, otherwise, thousands of tons of force would have ripped him in two. The punch landed firmly on Black Manta's abdomen. The special diving suit was indeed of superior quality, but it was powerless against sheer force. Diana's standard strike was simply not something an ordinary person could withstand. The opponent's oxygen mask was tightly fitted, a highly effective tool for both diving and underwater combat. This time, however, it was a painful experience. A mouthful of blood rushed to his lips, but the tight seal of the mask forced it back into his trachea, nearly choking him. He tried to cough but couldn't, and he couldn't swallow. Unable to continue the fight, he turned and ran. Come back. Tell me, what is your purpose? Diana flinched, lassoing Black Manta. As she spoke, the lasso of truth shone with flashes of light. Collect 3 of the Deathly Lord's artifacts, find the 7th, rule the land, and kill Aquaman. Black Manta was truly horrified. Despite his desperate resistance, the power of the artifacts was no joke. Even gods had to speak truthfully before the lasso of truth. A mortal being, he couldn't control his mouth, so he spilled his gut, revealing his every motive. These words meant little to Diana. Unaware of the lasso's power, the Arab woman was skeptical, but when these words reached Thea, they made her ponder. Thea only knew the general story of Aquaman Arthur Curry. The Death King Black Manta mentioned was the first king of Atlantis. She vaguely remembered the 7th artifact was a staff. Its power was undeniable, but if she thought she could rule the land with a staff, she'd have to think twice. A staff? A staff. The thought suddenly flooded Thea's mind. While it was possible to cast spells with a sword, it looked more like a Maotian Taoist priest than a mage. If she had that staff, wouldn't her next spellcasting look be stunning? This item is meant for me. Thea nodded silently. Her initial indifference to the matter suddenly changed. She only remembered that the Death King's relics were left on a small island in the Atlantic Ocean. The Aquaman 6 knew the exact location, but she didn't. Your enemies seem to be plotting something big and need us, Thea said to the Arab woman, putting on a righteous face. But before she could finish her words, she was interrupted by a flash of golden light. Teleportation? Thea felt the unknown rainforest grow increasingly lively. A golden light flashed, and a man and 2 women emerged from the midst. The leading man, shirtless and wearing green pants, held a gleaming golden trident upside down. Behind him was a red-haired woman in a green leotard and a crown. Last of all emerged a woman with a frantic, brown complexion, flanked by 2 jaguars. Why had Aquaman arrived? Although she had never met him, Thea recognized him from his distinct features. The woman with the crown behind him must be his wife, Mara. As for the last woman, whom Thea ignored, she was undoubtedly one of Aquaman's 6 companions. She studied the others, and Aquaman and his companions were also looking at her. For a moment, everyone was stunned. There were so many people. There were 2 people on Thea's side, 3 on Aquaman's side, and 2 prisoners, Cheetah and Black Manta. The Arab woman saw her companions and was about to greet them when Aquaman roared, raised his trident, and unleashed a bolt of lightning as thick as a child's arm at Black Manta. Although she felt Black Manta was a bad guy, she knew it was no one else's place to attack her prisoner. Diana's heroic brows arched, her right hand clenched tightly around her shield, and she swung it sideways, aiming at the lightning's direction. The first clash between the 2 artifacts ended in a draw. Lightning was sent flying, and a massive beam of energy cascaded into the rainforest, destroying countless trees in its path before disappearing from sight. Asshole! How dare you stop me? Aquaman's temper was as surly as ever. Diana initially considered arguing with him, but seeing his rude words, she abandoned the argument. She used the lasso of truth to securely bind Black Manta, raised the protective silver bracelet on her wrist, and a torrent of energy gushed out across several meters towards Aquaman. Aquaman hadn't expected this woman to block his lightning. Feeling the invisible energy radiating from the bracelet, he didn't dare to be indifferent, swinging his trident like a windmill. Amidst the relentless crackling sounds, the trident's surface was enveloped in a golden glow. As Aquaman swung, the golden light struggled to resist. The energy from the protective silver bracelet propelled Aquaman backward 30 meters before he finally stopped. Woman, you, Aquaman said calmly, attempting to explain. But Diana's current life goal was to eliminate gender discrimination, and Aquaman's words didn't comfort her. Instead, they pierced her. Without further ado, she struck down with her sword. Chapter 371 Thea, Diana vs. Aquaman. Mera. Are your natural incompatibility levels even this high? Thea was speechless. She only remembered the two of them fighting during the Flashpoint paradox, but this wasn't Flashpoint. Their fight was inexplicable. Thea wanted to mediate, but she didn't know where to begin. She turned, ready to ask the Arab woman to speak up and persuade them to take her to the staff. Turning back, she saw the brown woman's two leopards fawning over the leopard woman. Leopard woman had somehow awakened, her yellow eyes radiating a captivating light. The brown woman spoke incessantly to Mera. Aquaman's wife looked slightly annoyed, but she raised her hands, a surge of water surging, attempting to break the ice that trapped leopard woman. Stop. Thea knew this was a farce, but she still had to earn Amanda's favor. She had to stop them from releasing leopard woman. Without even putting on her armor, she instantly unleashed 3 flaming arrows, aiming at Mera and shooting them. Surface people. How dare you attack me? Mera, who didn't know if a close relative had come today, seemed possessed by a mindless, unhappy spirit. Water streams swirled around her hands, gently caressing them into dozens of icy arrows that met Thea's magical arrows. The 2 arrows collided in mid-air. Thea's magic was more refined, while Mera's was superior in sheer numbers, resulting in a clash of equals. Yeah. Wallah, what are you doing? They're not bad people. The Arab woman quickly restrained the brown-skinned woman who was about to attack Thea. Cassina, are you okay? But my animal companions say they are bad people. The brown-skinned woman, yeah. Wallah, also sensed something was amiss and hurriedly called back to her pets. But the pets, once ready to die for her, didn't respond. 2 jaguars were desperately trying to help the leopard woman escape. Even the most naive person could tell something was amiss by looking at the leopard woman's wild, erect pupils. Unfortunately, no matter the brown woman's calls, the jaguars ignored her. When their claws broke, they bit them, and when their teeth broke, they butted them with their heads. Tiny cracks gradually appeared in the solid ice surrounding Cheetah. You too, hold the leopard. The woman in the ice has blood on her hands. We can't let her out. If you have time, persuade the woman across from me. Thea, far superior to Mera, had time to observe the battlefield. Aquaman's 2 companions could only pull back the 2 leopards. The Arabian woman, exhausted from being chased for dozens of miles by Black Manta, and the brown woman, too afraid to use force against her pet, tugged at the leopard's tail and legs. The leopard ignored them, focused solely on rescuing Cheetah. The scene was utterly unsettling. Idiot, Thea nearly spat out blood. Mera, her eyes crimson across from her, refused to listen to her explanations, unleashing ice spikes, ice bolts, and water dragons. Diana, on the other side, was able to suppress Aquaman slightly, but she was determined to protect Black Manta, making it impossible to break the deadlock. Help me hold those 2 jaguars back, Thea whispered, releasing the dozing elk from the ring. The elk immediately sensed the cheetah god possessing Catwoman, especially since he had stolen the moon goddess's power. However, the elk faithfully followed Thea's orders, using his antlers to push back the jaguars whenever they approached. Does your friend understand English? Someone tried to stop her, Thea muttered. Speechless as she fended off Mera's onslaught. What a pair. Aquaman's 2 companions shouted, trying to get Mera to stop. But the Atlantean queen ignored them and continued her assault. Needless to say, this was the work of the cheetah god possessing Catwoman. His tactics weren't particularly sophisticated, but they were only ignited by Mera's fiery temper. It made sense that Mera would be chosen by the enraged Red Ring. However, temper doesn't equate to strength. Despite her exceptional performance, she was inevitably outmatched by Thea. Her water control, inherited from her race, was undoubtedly formidable underwater, but on land, she was limited to the same few abilities. While Thea's own water attributes weren't as strong as hers, Thea possessed a vast array of skills. Fireballs countered her ice bolts, wind blades, light spears, and shadow bolts, combined with a barrage of crowd-controlling, weakening spells, unleashed a barrage of devastating blows. I'll take her away, while you go and talk to that guy with a fork. Fearing their fight would break the ice within Leopard Woman, Thea pulled out her lantern ring, donning it. Dense chains of materialized chains bound Mera and flew away. Once out of range, the mind control effect would wear off, and the opponent would regain consciousness. Thea's calculations were sound, but she flew a bit too fast, leaving the two women on the ground a step behind. She hadn't factored in the variable of Aquaman. "How dare you hurt my wife?" Aquaman, seeing Thea tying up Mera and fleeing, flew into a rage. Despite taking a blow from Diana's sword, his trident, ablaze with lightning, hurled a basin-sized ball of lightning at Thea. "Do you think you're the only one who can wield lightning?" This idiotic couple really infuriated Thea. Drawing her magical longbow, she knocked Zeus's lightning bolt and unleashed a powerful arrow at the lightning ball below. The lightning ball from Aquaman's trident was white, like a storm brewing in the ocean. Thea's lightning bolt was a deep blue, as tranquil as the sky, yet within the stillness lay a deadly danger. These two divine artifacts, each capable of emitting lightning power, clashed for the first time since their forging. One was like a roar from the ocean, the other like divine retribution from the sky. The Atlantean artifact embodied the final glory of a lost civilization, steadfast, resilient, and unquestionable. Just as Thea's arrow of Zeus embodied the supreme, great, and invincible spirit of the gods. Two bolts of lightning, each of different colors, finally converged, and time seemed to freeze. For a second, everything was calm, the previous ferocious scene seemingly non-existent. Then, the two energy balls finally exploded violently. Boom, both balls vanished, and the sound of the explosion pierced the air. The immense energy spread in all directions. The two women, about to speak up to explain, could only drop to the ground, dodging the shockwave that swept across a 10-mile radius of the rainforest. This round of fighting seemed evenly matched, but Aquaman had been injured by Diana before, and the trident had been incubated too quickly, unable to unleash its full power. Thea was even more hastily engaged. Her lightning magic required a blend of fire, wind, and water, and the arrows she fired were merely their own power, far below her maximum damage potential. Both were frustrated, simultaneously gathering energy for the next attack. Mera, though bewildered, still recognized Aquaman. She broke free from her materialization chains and attempted to engage Thea in a duel. Diana couldn't just stand by and watch, so she also stopped Mera. The four of them swapped opponents, preparing for a chaotic second round. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 372, Truce and the Story. Diana had frequently sparred with Thea, well versed in dealing with elemental energies. Mera's water control was merely a minor nuisance, not a fatal blow. Her shield blocked the barrage of ice and water arrows, while her Vulcan sword slashed continuously. Mera could only mobilize vast quantities of water elemental energy to form a shield to block the blows. Meanwhile, Thea's battle with Aquaman was not as gentle and delicate as theirs. The lightning element was renowned for its unruly and powerful power, its thunderous impact resonating through the heavens. Energy exploded, and dazzling light and sound effects ensued, the clash between the two men reaching a fever pitch from the outset. Bewildered by the two women, Aquaman had long forgotten his original purpose. Thea, eager to test the true power of the much-vaunted trident of Poseidon, unleashed a relentless barrage of lightning bolts, occasionally channeling her own magical energy into them to deliver a surprise attack on Aquaman. Come down if you dare, Aquaman was left on the defensive. He was nearly invincible underwater, but his strength was significantly reduced on land. Crucially, he couldn't fly. Being shot at like a target by Thea, after a long while, his already hot temper could no longer be suppressed. Hovering in midair, Thea didn't just fire arrows, she also occasionally cast weakening spells. Perhaps it was the trident in hand, or perhaps his Atlantean blood, but Aquaman's magic resistance was incredibly high. Of all the people Thea had met, only Diana had a higher resistance. He could resist 9 out of 10 spells, and the remaining one only lasted a short time. Fear, simple magic couldn't defeat him, so Thea had to infuse it with emotional energy, using the power of the lantern ring to continuously infuse Aquaman's heart. This time, he couldn't resist. The tragic images of his father's death, the cold stares from the people around him, and the desertion of several companions filled his mind. Arthur, seeing her husband in danger, Mera finally broke free from the cheetah god's control. Her vision cleared, and she raised her arm, using her wrist guard to absorb Diana's sword strike. She leaped into the air, creating a vast mass of ice to protect her husband, completely disregarding her own safety. She eyed Thea and Diana warily. HMPH, it had all been a misunderstanding, so Thea naturally stopped attacking and turned to look at her captive. This sight infuriated her. Black Manta had been previously bound by Diana's lasso, but the fight had escalated rapidly, with Diana leaving him in the care of Aquaman's two companions. Black Manta had taken advantage of their unpreparedness and launched a sudden attack, wounding the Arab woman, snatching the bundle from her back, and fleeing deeper into the jungle. The brown woman, juggling the task of caring for her injured companion and holding onto her two pet jaguars, her already weak mind was completely bewildered. Thea had intended to chase Black Manta, but by then, Cheetah had broken free. Though still covered in ice, she could barely run. "How dare you run!" Thea unleashed a lightning bolt and shot, urging Diana to chase after them. Aquaman and Mera, realizing their marital blunder and seeing their companions were not in mortal danger, joined in the interception. Cheetah, though formidable, had sustained significant injuries from her previous encounter. She was now unable to defeat any of the four men. She hadn't made it 3 kilometers before she was surrounded, beaten, and recaptured. This time, they couldn't afford to be complacent. While Cheetah might not pose a threat, the cheetah god possessing her was a real problem, especially with his silent, bewitching tactics, which were causing them a bit of annoyance. Fortunately, where magic can't solve it, there's science. Thea told the elk to go back to sleep while she sorted through her space ring, retrieving several pieces of metal. These pieces of metal were specially crafted by Batman to prevent a Martian manhunter's mind control. Their composition and origin were unknown, making them a true example of advanced technology. Damien had taken it from his father, a gift he'd given to her to study the relationship between science and magic. Thea had modified it into a headband and placed it around the leopard girl's head. From a distance, it looked like a tight headband, though it certainly blocked the leopard's mental vibrations. After tightly binding the leopard girl, Thea rose and greeted the others. The brown woman, Yavala, apologized. It was her leopards who had been bewitched first. The two leopards, now out of control, looked pitiful and cooperative, lowering their heads and whimpering, begging for forgiveness. Thea had a special fondness for animals now, having encountered countless animals, including elk, gorillas, sharks, and unicorns. Touching the two leopards' heads, she felt a delightful touch. She was thinking about asking Yavala if she had any cubs so she could take one home to raise. The two leopards had broken claws, lost teeth, and were filthy. Thea cast 2 cleansing and healing spells, and their bodies were visibly healing. The Arab woman, Cassina, clutched her shoulder, pierced by Black Manta's blow. She looked pitiful, and after a moment's thought, Thea cast a healing spell on her. They exchanged names, and Thea, expecting exclamations of "It's you," and "Impossible," was met with a startling reaction. They were either hermits, savages, or simply underwater dwellers, and had never heard of Thea. Slightly frustrated, Thea went off to play with the 2 leopards. After she healed them, their friendship with her increased significantly. If it weren't for their deeper connection to Yavala, they would likely have returned to Star City with her. The remaining people didn't have the same leisurely mood. The Arab woman, reminiscent of being pursued by Black Manta and having her mortal enemy captured by 2 passing strangers, was quite pleased. However, a bloody battle ensued, and the prize she had secured flew away. Not only did the prize vanish, but it also injured her and stole the Death King's artifact, the Golden Seal. This lady's artifacts, the Arab woman pointed at Diana. Black Manta told the truth. He wants 3 artifacts, to open the cemetery mark and find the Death King's 7th artifact. The Arab woman, Cassina, recounted everything she knew. "I'm gathering my companions to fight Black Manta together," Aquaman declared passionately, and Mera looked at him lovingly. Thea's lips curled. "You, several superpowered beings armed with a multitude of artifacts, are attacking a mere mortal, and yet you're so brazen about it? Do you have any shame? Do you need our help?" Thea remained silent. Diana, with her overly righteous sense, said, "We don't need your help, Greek." Mera eyed Diana warily. Her husband had too many women around him. Cassina and Yavala kept claiming to be his companions, but she had never heard him mention them. Smitten with blind love, Mera watched every woman who approached her husband like a beast. Chapter 373 Teacher Shia tells a story. Hearing her unfriendly tone, Thea became unhappy. Greeks? The Greeks once fought side by side with the Atlanteans. You won't look down on your former allies. Besides, I don't think you are an Atlantean. You are a Zebel, right? The exiled people of Atlantis. Aquaman was confused and turned to look at his wife. Mera avoided Aquaman's sight with a hint of panic in the corner of her eyes. Thea continued to bombard him with explosive material. The Death King. Is that what you call him? Don't you know his real name is Atlan? He's the founder and builder of Atlantis and the first king. But in the mouths of you descendants, he has become the Death King. How ridiculous. Diana also assisted. I know Atlan. Mother's books mentioned him. He was a great king. His achievements are comparable to those of the saints in the history of human heroes. This, Aquaman Arthur Curry was completely speechless. Half a year ago, he was still guarding a lighthouse in Maine. How could he know these secrets from tens of thousands of years ago? Others called him the Death King, so he followed suit. Now he has realized that it is inappropriate. It's like he is an ancestor. Atlan, the dead king you're talking about, founded Atlantis on land. It was a civilization that predates current Earth civilization. King Atlantis was a man of broad mind. He discarded prejudices and embraced all races. Anyone who shared his ideals was considered a member of Atlantis. Thea began to lecture them. This information was, of course, a memory. Diana, knowing she'd read countless books, wasn't surprised. The rest of Aquaman and his wife also listened with rapt attention. Promoting harmonious coexistence between surface and underwater peoples had always been Aquaman's goal. Hearing that his ancient ancestors had done the same thing, a strong sense of identification washed over him. Unexpectedly, Thea did a complete about-face, and her next words dealt him a heavy blow. The Death King's inclusive policy caused strong dissatisfaction among conservatives. His brother launched a coup and seized the Neptune's trident, which symbolized authority. The founder and pioneer of the kingdom was expelled from his home by his relatives. You mean? Neptune held up the trident in his hand, his face full of disbelief. My ancestors are traitors. She shook her head slightly. Whether they were traitors or not, the truth has long been lost in history, but I only know that the statement about the seventh artifact you were discussing just now is incorrect. Pointing to the trident in Neptune's hand, this trident was cast by the Death King in his early years. After he was expelled from the country, he reforged 6 artifacts, and you got 5 of them, and the remaining one. What about the remaining one? Several people hurriedly asked. Even the 2 jaguars lying on the ground who couldn't understand human language pricked up their ears and listened. Thea hesitated. The records say the Death King finally forged a staff. In his hands, this staff possessed near infinite power. He sank the entire continent of Atlantis with a single strike. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. Artifacts aren't that powerful, Diana explained calmly. Thea didn't say anything. Either the staff only reached its full power in the hands of the Death King, or he'd found some magical node, like the infernal island where Oliver had spent years. Otherwise, sinking an entire continent with a single strike would be incredibly powerful. We can help you fight Black Manta, but the Death King's staff is too dangerous to remain in Atlantean hands. Thea finally explained her purpose, then dropped a bombshell. After sinking Atlantis, the Death King vanished from view. Many believe he transcended the boundary between life and death and remained slumbering somewhere. Human scholars, Greek gods, and even your own records refer to him as the Death King for this very reason. None of them were fools, and Thea's meaning dawned on them. If they kept it in their own hands, they'd have to face the Death King head-on. If they gave it to Thea, they'd have someone to share their hatred with. Who knows, if the Death King resurrected, he might just come crashing down on land. Mera thought this was a good idea and winked at Aquaman, urging him to agree. People on land. Aquaman hesitated. Should the Death King's bombshell be dropped on land, or on the people of Atlantis? Without his artifacts, he can't unleash his full power. With so many people on land, he'll be spotted the moment he appears. Thea felt the old zombie wouldn't be able to withstand a couple of Superman's punches, so she had no problem taking his equipment. Well, as the King of Atlantis, I grant your request. The Death King's staff will remain on the surface. Aquaman didn't care about the artifacts. He distributed all 5 found that day among his companions. He had rejected the impressive armor he was supposed to inherit, opting instead for a belt symbolizing his authority and a trident. The 2 sides happily finalized the details, and Yavala, possessing the orb of teleport, went to fetch their remaining companions. Several people quickly gathered. There was the war prisoner, wearing Death King's golden shackles and able to cast a protective stance. There was the detective, armed with a golden key that could open any lock. The last to arrive was Vostok, wearing a golden helmet that allowed him to survive in a waterless, airless environment, without the need for food or water. Vostok was an astronaut who had grown up in a confined environment. Mara breathed a sigh of relief when she saw her husband's 3 companions were all men. Before they could formally discuss the matter, Amanda arrived. "So many people? Detective? Why are you here? When will you send me the documents I asked you to find last time?" Amanda disembarked and immediately spotted the detective, clad in high-tech gear, revealing no skin. She looked at the war prisoner. "Soldier, which unit are you in? I think I've seen your designation." Thea quickly pulled her aside. Amanda was almost obsessed with rebuilding her suicide squad, and she needed Cheetah to be subtle. But Thea had to warn her, Cheetah's power wasn't something someone like Harley Quinn could easily manipulate. On the other side, Aquaman also called the detective aside and asked what Amanda did. The detective maintained close contact with many organizations around the world. Naturally, he had dealt with the famous Amanda many times. He was a little puzzled as to how Aquaman got involved with Amanda, but he did not hide anything from his friend and told him the information he knew. Government personnel, the Sky Eye Society. Although Aquaman had lived on the ground for many years, he had always been isolated from the news and knew nothing about high-level intelligence. "That young woman. How did you know her?" The detective pointed his chin at Thea, who was talking to Amanda. Aquaman could only recount the confusing fight between the 2 groups of people. Chapter 374. Can you teleport to? After Aquaman finished speaking, he noticed that the detective seemed to be lost in thought. "Why, is she famous among humans too?" "I don't have much impression of her." The detective gave him a glare, speechless at his friend's slowness. Thea had already taken off her mask, so how could the detective, who had been active in intelligence gathering for years, not know her? "She's a super rich person. I've collected a lot of information about her. If you hadn't told me, I really wouldn't have thought she was a super-powered person." "How strong is her fighting ability?" Aquaman was extremely embarrassed when he heard this question. He had just faced the shock of fear, and if Mara hadn't used a large ice wall to keep him awake, he would have almost spoken nonsense. Now, in front of his old friend, he couldn't say that he was almost beaten to the ground and called out for his father. He could only vaguely say, "It's about the same as me." The detective couldn't help but look at him twice, which made Aquaman feel uneasy, so he changed the subject. "Arthur, if you want the surface and underwater people to get along, she can offer some help. She's been making a lot of big moves in recent years, and the government and military are behind it." Aquaman nodded. It was too early to say anything now. Neither the surface nor the underwater people were ready to accept the other side. He needed to observe before making a decision. Not far away, Thea and Amanda completed the handover. Several heavily armed soldiers carried the truncheon, who was tied up like a dumpling on the ground, onto the plane. From then on, any problems would have nothing to do with Thea. If they wanted to ask her for help again, they would have to pay a new price. After Amanda left, Aquaman gave everyone a brief introduction. The next step was to figure out how to deal with Black Manta. "It's too humid here. Can we talk on my plane? I feel uneasy walking on the ground." The detective interrupted Aquaman, and everyone looked around. The rainforest, once a deserted place, was shattered by the lightning collision between Thea and Aquaman. Ditches filled the ground, many trees were billowing with smoke, and swarms of birds and insects were fleeing the area. It was a chaotic place in every sense of the word. Their small group's gathering place had always been the detective's plane, known as the living room. Yervala used her artifact, the Golden Orb, to create a remote portal, teleporting several people to the plane at an altitude of 10,000 meters. This was Thea's first time using someone else's portal, and she could only say it lived up to its name: convenient, fast, stable, and efficient. As long as one remembered a location, they could teleport there regardless of distance. The only regret was that it could be used by anyone. Thea and Diana, as outsiders, did not participate in their discussion. Amazingly, their small group had even subtly excluded Mara, Aquaman's wife, from their group, and Aquaman, in his days, hadn't noticed anything was amiss. Mara's frustration was indescribable. She and Aquaman had been enjoying a comfortable life at the port of Thanthan Lighthouse, when suddenly Yavara teleported in, saying Cassina was in danger. Her husband rushed her to rescue her. Honestly, Mara hadn't even known Yavara or Cassina before. Then, bewitched by the cheetah god, she engaged in a chaotic battle with Thea and Diana. ultimately ending up on this plane to discuss countermeasures. Alice, she had no idea who her enemy was. Within her tribe, Merlyn, with her water-controlling abilities, was a symbol of royalty, having been raised as a queen in Atlantis. Now, being subtly ostracized by Aquaman's small group, she felt deeply distressed, but couldn't show it, so she could only watch from the sidelines. After listening for a moment, Thea understood why they couldn't defeat Black Manta. Cassandra was known as a seer, but her abilities were limited, comparable to Sinestro's Lisa Draca, who could only predict the next few seconds. Yavala was a wild child raised in the jungle. Her ability to speak English was a testament to her linguistic talent. Asking her for advice was a dream. Prisoners of war were constantly haunted by the ghosts of their comrades, lost in their own inner world for 59 of the 60 minutes. Vostok, a severely autistic man, would rather hide away for 2 years wearing a helmet that prevented him from eating than speak a word to anyone. The only two people on their team who could offer advice were the detective and Aquaman. The detective, however, was a 70-year-old man with an extremely conservative style. He suggested to Aquaman that they split up again, lure Black Manta to steal the 3 artifacts, and then set an ambush. Aquaman, of course, wouldn't put his companions in danger. His idea was to find the enemy and engage in direct combat. The detective refused to agree, and the two argued for half an hour. At the very end, Aquaman was about to jump out of the plane alone to pursue Black Manta, but Thea quickly stopped him. Black Manta was just an ordinary person, not a big deal. It looked like they were going to break up. Arthur, my satellite has found Black Manta. He's buying some equipment at a black market in Germany, but the satellite thing was nonsense. It was all Deathstroke spies on the global black market. Let's wait until there's no one around, then take him down. Thea generally supported Aquaman's idea. The old detective's suggestion of going to all that trouble, just a surprise attack, was completely unnecessary. Now, with Thea, Diana, Merlyn, and their small team, 9 people, over 10 artifacts, and still not enough to take down Black Manta? Thea didn't believe it. Unexpectedly supported, Aquaman gave the old detective a provocative look. The old detective was well-mannered and didn't care to acknowledge the young man's arrogance. He asked for the coordinates Thea had given him and flew the plane straight to Germany. Thea reassigned 2 more satellites to Europe, transmitting the signal directly to the detective's plane. Using facial recognition, it wasn't difficult to locate Black Manta's unusual diving helmet, and Black Manta quickly appeared on the plane's display screen. How could they capture him? The others were scratching their heads. After careful questioning, Thea learned that Yavra's teleportation artifact required a location they had been to or someone they knew well. She and Black Manta had only met once, so they were far from familiar with each other. We had to take action. Thea was delighted. Put on your gear, and I'll teleport you there. You can teleport too. Yavra, the jungle-raised girl who, through the 2 jaguars, had the closest relationship with Thea on the Aquaman team, asked in disbelief. What did she mean by can teleport too? Thea pouted. Your artifact's function. Mine is my own knowledge. It's completely different. He nodded casually, indicating that he could teleport, opened the Eye of Horus, and observed the Black Manta ray 10,000 meters in the sky, looking for the best opportunity to attack. Chapter 375 Aquaman vs. Black Manta, extra update for the captain's delicious sticky rice. Black Manta's body was clearly not fully recovered, and he still walked with a slight shakiness. Though Diana's punch wasn't full strength, and much of the impact had been absorbed by his waterproof suit, the little force left was more than a normal person, without any abilities, enhancements, or mutations, could handle. He desperately tried to escape the rainforest, but his injuries only worsened. He injected some healing potions, but they had little effect. Thea surveyed the area. The enemy seemed defenseless, but Horus's sight revealed several other individuals wearing diving suits. They were undoubtedly Black Manta's men, perhaps sensing that Aquaman and his group possessed a teleportation artifact and were laying ambushes. As Aquaman's nemesis, Black Manta knew his enemy well. Without the 2 variables of Thea and Diana, Aquaman would have undoubtedly charged headfirst into his encirclement. Everyone, Thea called out, drawing their attention. The enemy is ambushing all around. Here's their layout. Using her magic, Thea sketched a map in the air, highlighting several hidden enemies. Except Black Manta, there are 15 enemies in total. The 8 in the east belong to the 2 of us, and the 7 in the west belong to the 5 of you. Arthur, you and your wife, Go capture Black Manta. Prepare your equipment. I'll open the portal in a minute. Remember, get through as quickly as possible, don't hesitate." Thea was fed up with their mindless play. They assigned specific tasks, just like they did at her own company. Aquaman thought it was appropriate for the couple to deal with their old enemy. The old detective was a little displeased, but considering her status, he forced himself to hold back. "Let's go." Seeing that they were all ready, Thea quickly opened a deep blue portal and stepped through. The others followed closely behind, filing out. "Attack, the enemy is coming." Black Manta suddenly saw a deep blue portal appear in the distance. He knew something was wrong and gave the order simultaneously with Thea, who had just stepped out of the portal. With incredible swiftness, Thea's longbow weapon dispatched 4 men in diving suits in the blink of an eye. Diana, whose ranged attacks were less effective, lassoed 2 of them, leaped over the remaining 2, and dispatched them one by one with a single punch. On the other side, Aquaman's 5 companions also defeated 7 ambushers. Everyone turned their attention to the frayed Aquaman. "Don't interfere, this is a feud between him and me." Aquaman Arthur Curry refused even Mara's offer of help, determined to defeat Black Manta himself. Black Manta realized this was his last chance for revenge, and he wielded his 2 long swords like a pinwheel, no longer concerned with escape or his injuries, only with the death of Arthur Curry. Aquaman's physical prowess clearly outmatched Black Manta, a mere mortal. However, Black Manta's technological equipment was specifically designed to counter Aquaman, and the two engaged in a fierce, evenly matched battle. The lightning bolts from Aquaman's trident were negated by the lasers fired from Black Manta's oxygen mask. Their initial clash was a desperate struggle, with Aquaman's tactics of exchanging wounds for wounds. However, his immense power inflicted little damage on Black Manta's wetsuit. Instead, the shirtless Aquaman was slashed twice, his blood gushing down his pants and onto the ground. "Should we help?" Diana asked. Thea shook her head. Aquaman and Black Manta's feud was their own personal problem, and outsiders couldn't intervene. Black Manta, driven by greed, tried to steal Aquaman's blood, accidentally injuring Aquaman's father. Naturally, Aquaman sought revenge, but after accidentally killing Black Manta's father, he learned that his own father had only been injured and had subsequently died of a heart attack. The target of revenge suddenly shifted. Black Manta, overcome with grief and rage, dissipated his wealth and, as a mere human, challenged the Lord of the Seven Seas. His actions, though undeserved, deserved praise. Thea saw in him a courage comparable to that of the Green Lanterns. A few men attacking Cheetah was perfectly acceptable, as she was possessed by an evil spirit. But with so many men surrounding Black Manta, Thea felt like the villain, so she decided to let him and Aquaman fight it out. Black Manta, using all his strength, spotted an opening and ensnared Aquaman with a massive fishing net, then plunged 2 blades into him. The net, made of an unknown material, tightened with every struggle, trapping the towering Aquaman in a ball of force. Unable to wield his trident, he abandoned it and tore through the net with his bare hands. Puff! Black Manta had been waiting for this opportunity, thrusting 2 long blades at him instantly. Unfortunately, no matter how well he calculated, he was only a human, while Aquaman, a hybrid of human and Atlantean, possessed innate strength, agility, and reflexes surpassing even a human's. Facing the deadly blows, Aquaman leaned slightly sideways, one piercing his left shoulder and the other his arm. His muscles tensed, he clamped down on Black Manta's blades. With his free hand, he clenched his fists and pounded furiously against Black Manta's oxygen mask. 1 punch, 2 punches, 3 punches. Black Manta realized his mistake and tried to let go, trying to distance himself. But Aquaman, using his strike as a preemptive strike, grabbed the air hose at the edge of the mask and, using his head as a hammer, rammed it into Black Manta's mask. That fight was so ugly, Thea almost slapped her face in her hand. Aquaman seemed brave in battle, but a side-by-side comparison of their physical abilities revealed that he was relying solely on his superior stats and resilience to bully. Diana, a devotee of Greek classical beauty, also looked away. Relying on brute force to overpower an opponent clearly inferior to her was hardly the glory of a warrior. Mara didn't care, she was even pleased with whatever her husband did. Aquaman's companions were also excited, practically applauding him. Black Manta was dazed by his blows, and the lasers on his oxygen mask fired continuously, blasting Aquaman's face and chest into a bloody mess. Aquaman ignored the damage, seemingly enraged, and kicked Black Manta to the ground, imitating Batman's tactics against Bane without a teacher, pulling out the tube. He grabbed the tube on Black Manta's oxygen mask and pulled it out. With a crack, an oxygen tube was pulled out by him, and a large piece of the oxygen mask was broken, revealing the appearance of an African man. The laser on Black Manta's mask was completely useless, but he still had a lot of equipment. The two of them fought in close combat, and each punch from Aquaman could cause him great damage, but Black Manta was also ruthless, and used all kinds of weapons to attack Aquaman. Water spikes, brass knuckles, stun guns, ropes with sharp blades. Black Manta used whatever he grabbed, and finally stuffed a miniature mine into Aquaman's wound. I've been a little busy recently. I worked hard to write 4 chapters last night. I'm begging for monthly tickets, recommendations, and subscriptions. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.